Chapter 1, Shin. Shin, the middle-aged man firmly advised, you should abandon that futile dream. In the room, a middle-aged man addressed the young man before him, his voice echoing with frustration. Continuing this nonsense will yield nothing. He thundered, leaving the young man bewildered. Hey! Where am I? Wondered the young man, bewildered by the middle-aged man's outburst. Who is he? He pondered as he gazed at the middle-aged man, dressed in a sleek black suit. Do you hear me, Shin? Inquired the middle-aged man, noticing Shin's dazed state. Sir! Who are you? Shin asked, his voice tinged with confusion. The middle-aged man was taken aback. Don't play games! He yelled, adding, your attempts to deceive me won't work. Regardless of what you say, my decision stands. Shin stammered, what decision? Who are you really? As Shin scanned the room, he noticed its spaciousness. He sat facing a desk adorned with a nameplate, likely used for office. The middle-aged man stood before him, while a couch and a table occupied the room. Shin turned to look out the window, observing the exterior and neighboring buildings. Slam! In frustration, the middle-aged man slammed his hand on the desk. I said, stop fooling around. Your charade won't succeed. If you can't accept my wishes as your father, you're free to leave my care. With that, the middle-aged man rose, adjusted his attire, and cast an annoyed glance at Shin, who still wore a bewildered expression. If you insist on playing this game, he declared, I'll indulge you. Wondering who I am? I'm your father, Shiro Suzuki. Having spoken, Shiro walked away and exited the room. Slam! The door slammed shut as Shiro left. Shin remained dazed, staring at his hands. My hands! They look so young and healthy, devoid of calluses, Shin mused as he examined his palms. What is happening? Shin's eyes widened as a realization struck him. Could it be? He searched for a mirror and quickly found one on his desk, rushing to inspect his reflection. No way! Shin gasped in shock as he studied his unfamiliar face. This isn't me. His new face was above average, with black eyes and hair. His eyes had double eyelids, and they were sharp. His nose was finely shaped, and his lips were thin. Could it be? I've been reborn. Shin whispered, finding everything too incredible to believe. Suddenly, a searing pain pierced his head, causing him to clutch it in agony. Ugh! Shin staggered from the pain, covering his mouth with wide eyes. In his other hand, he tightly gripped an office nameplate, as the pain temporarily disabled some of his bodily functions while a flood of memories rushed into his mind. After a minute, the pain finally began to subside, but for Shin, that minute felt like an eternity. Ah, now it makes sense, Shin murmured with a chuckle. I truly have been reborn. He then examined the nameplate in his hand, which he had clutched tightly during the painful ordeal. He focused on the name. Shinro Suzuki. The design of the font resembled elegant calligraphy, bold and graceful, and it was written in Japanese. In his previous life, he had been nothing more than a loyal employee of a certain company. He had done everything for that organization. However, at the age of 30, his boss, the CEO of a gaming company, had decided to terminate him. This decision came after he had inadvertently witnessed his boss engaging in an illicit affair with a family member, the daughter-in-law. Although he had kept silent about it for a month, his boss had mistakenly believed that he intended to expose the affair. This misunderstanding led to the end of his life. For that sole reason, Math Algebra, his name in his former life, had passed away at the age of 30. I've been reborn into a wealthy family. Shin muttered, tossing aside the office name tag. But why? Math sighed. Despite being reborn into this affluent family, he couldn't find happiness. Why? Because he was the family's black sheep. He was the youngest, and all his siblings had their own thoughts, but they all shared the same view of him, Shinro Suzuki. A waste. They considered him useless, a freeloader who contributed nothing of value to the family business. However, Math disagreed. Shin had considerable foresight. Why? He wanted to create video games. It might not sound impressive, but in this world, it was groundbreaking. In this parallel world, there were no wildly popular video games, and the video game industry was practically non-existent, except for Tetris and a large console version of Ping Pong. In fact, this world was still in the year 1990, with no Mario or similar pixelated games. The only forms of entertainment were novels, television, soap operas, sports, movies, and games played on large machines or consoles, which were not yet commonplace. What's amusing is that Tetris had been created much earlier in this world, but the game only consisted of parentheses. Unlike the Tetris in his previous world, which was 8-bit, featured various shapes, and was colorful. Here, it remained unfinished, created by a Russian. No wonder the people in this world found it boring. Math chuckled, placing his hands in his pockets and sighing. It's challenging, but fun. I like this world. I consider myself a bit of a gamer, as I used to play Flappy Bird during my free hours. I might not be as skilled as a gamer, but I know a lot about games from my previous job at a gaming company. In fact, if given the choice, he would have become a full-time gamer. However, life had been too demanding, so he had settled for playing Flappy Bird despite working in the gaming industry. As a token of gratitude for giving me this second chance at life, I'll treasure it and live it to the fullest, fulfilling your dream, Shin, Math muttered. He then retrieved the office nameplate he had tossed aside earlier and stared at the name. I'll take your place, and from now on, I'll be Shin. Shin smiled, but it felt like the merging of two kindred souls who had once been lost. In a state of annoyance, Shiro strode into the company's grand hall. Upon entering his opulent office, his secretary greeted him with a respectful bow. As he sank into the plush chair behind his desk, the phone on his desk began to ring with a classic, old-fashioned beep-beep reminiscent of a 1990s phone. "Hello, honey," Shiro answered as he brought the receiver to his ear. "Hello, husband. How is Shinro doing?" a female voice inquired. The voice belonged to Eri, Shiro's wife and the mother of Shinro. "Why are you still worried about that boy? He's incredibly stubborn," Shiro sighed, irritation evident in his voice. "I can't believe he hasn't inherited a single one of my genes." "Stop with those thoughts. Shinro is your son." Eri's voice carried a note of anger. "Humph, why can't he be more like his elder brother Shiko? Both Shinro and his second brother have these absurd dreams." Shiro's frustration erupted as he bellowed into the phone. "Husband, they're my sons? I'm well aware. What I can't fathom is how you allowed Shinro to drop out of high school and establish a subsidiary company under the Suzuki Group without my consent." Shiro's voice thundered, cutting off Eri. "Husband, I'm simply supporting our child." Eri's voice quivered with sorrow. "Support? Do you genuinely believe you're helping him? Look at what happened to our second son. He resorted to begging on the streets to pursue his dreams. You supported him too, and look at the outcome." Eri's voice turned melancholic. "But, music is what makes him happy, husband." "Happy? Ha ha ha, it won't last. Your support has only made them worse. If you don't know what you're doing, it's better to do nothing at all," Shiro declared, his frustration unabated. I understand," Eri's voice responded sadly over the phone. Plus. This is my new fanfic novel, or more like an original, but this will plagiarized games such as Mario or others, so it is in the video games fanfic category. Chapter 2, Busted. As Shin sat in his office, comfortably nestled in his plush chair, diligently jotting down his plans on a sheet of paper resting on his desk, an unexpected group of individuals entered his workspace. The resonance of their approaching footsteps snapped Shin's attention away from his work. He was met with the sight of these people in the process of removing items from his office. Startled, he inquired, "What's going on here?" One of the individuals, laboring alongside another to carry away a sofa, responded, "Chairman Shiro has issued orders to shut down the game company subsidiary, and this office falls under that subsidiary of the Suzuki Group." In that moment, Shin's realization struck like a bolt of lightning. He had momentarily overlooked this crucial detail, preoccupied as he was with the tumultuous mix of emotions stemming from his transmigration into this new life. He recalled how the previous Shin, with the help of his mother, had dropped out of high school to establish a subsidiary company under the Suzuki Group. Yet, before his endeavors could even begin, his father had decided to shutter the subsidiary. Fortunately, Shin hadn't hired any employees yet. Otherwise, the embarrassment of having his company disbanded before it had a chance to operate would have been unbearable. It was precisely this situation that had led Shin's father to visit the office, intent on dissuading the previous Shin from pursuing what he deemed a futile dream. However, Shin's unusual despair and his past experiences of being disliked and bullied at school had rendered his father's counsel ineffective. His mother was equally powerless, as Shin's father had intervened to allow Shin to gain strength from facing such challenges. Instead, this had plunged Shin into depression. Therefore, when he received news of his company's demise at the hands of his father, Shin had resorted to consuming sleeping pills, causing him to slip into a hazy unconsciousness. Yet, it was during this fragile moment that math had taken possession of Shin's body, guiding him back to consciousness just as Shin's father, Shiro, entered the office. Now, with his company gone, Shin contemplated the fate of his dreams while gazing at a drawing of his blueprint that resembled a circuit board. Annotations lined the sketches, with labels like CPU, PPU, Picture Processing Unit, Memory, Audio Processing Unit, APU, and even cartridges in prominent positions. It was a design for an 8-bit game console, reminiscent of Nintendo's first console. With this blueprint in hand, I only need to code a game, and I could begin my journey to establishing an industry, Shin murmured, his eyes fixed on the heavens. His dream was vast and ambitious, attracting curious glances from passers-by on the sidewalk. But without financial support. Shin sighed, his helplessness palpable. He walked over to the parking lot, where his modest car, a birthday gift from his mother, stood. His father, Shiro, had never shown such generosity. The car was relatively new, purchased just a year ago. Shin had turned 18 since then and, by all rights, should have been the one driving. However, he lacked a driver's license, and his father had shown no interest in assisting him in obtaining one. Then, as Shin prepared to start the car's engine, an idea struck him like a thunderbolt. I could sell this car to raise capital for my company, Shin mused aloud, his gaze shifting between the blueprint and the car. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, lost in thought. This car, it was bought for 400,000 yen. Even if I can get 200,000 or 300,000 yen for it, it won't be enough. But it could at least cover the cost of hiring someone to help with game and console development. I can't do this all on my own, especially with the console requiring low-level assembly language programming, it's quite time-consuming without assistance. Shin resolved to seek out individuals interested in cars, particularly affordable ones. The previous Shin had meticulously cared for this car, leaving it in pristine condition, which would undoubtedly command a higher price. Shin arrived at a Toyota dealership branch, patiently waiting for potential buyers. He sat in his car, tapping the steering wheel as time passed. In the distance, a couple approached the dealership, catching Shin's attention. He quickly stepped out of his car to intercept them. The couple greeted Shin with a bow, and the man spoke, "Nice to meet you. We're here to look for cars. Can you recommend one?" They assumed he was an employee of the dealership. Smiling, Shin, who had initially come to sell his car at a lower price, played along, "Hello, sir. Welcome to the Toyota car dealership. He led the couple to his car parked nearby. The couple seemed slightly surprised, considering the car was in the parking lot adjacent to the dealership. Shin noticed their expressions and explained, "Sir, this is a new car that was just delivered. It hasn't been brought inside yet." The couple, who had found the situation peculiar moments earlier, now nodded in understanding. The man asked, "Is that so? Can you provide information about this car?" Shin smiled and nodded, "Certainly. This is the Toyota Starlet. It's known for its fuel efficiency." Seeing the couple's interest, Shin continued, "It's also practical and suitable for a family or someone planning to start one." The couple nodded in agreement. The woman added, "Yes, I was just proposed to, and we thought we needed a car for our small family." Shin laughed, "That's great, sir. Not only is this car fuel efficient and practical, but it's also budget friendly." Noticing the couple's waning interest at the mention of budget friendly, Shin sensed their concern that such a car might not be durable. To reassure them, he added, "The Toyota Starlet is also reliable. Its history shows that it's dependable and durable." Seeing the couple's interest rekindle, the woman inquired, "Is the performance of this car good?" Shin nodded and launched into a detailed explanation. The engine of the Toyota Starlet is an inline-4 with a displacement of 1.5 liters. It uses a carburetor for fuel, and its power output ranges from 60 to 100 horsepower. The technical details left the couple somewhat bewildered. The woman quickly interjected, Okay. What's the price?" Shin smiled, "It's priced at 420,000 yen, ma'am." The man considered the price thoughtfully, realizing it was within their budget. However, the woman appeared hesitant, thinking there was no room for negotiation. Sensing her hesitation, Shin swiftly added, "Since you're planning to start a family, our company is offering a discount. It's now only 410,000 yen. The couple was taken aback by the unexpected discount and decided to inspect the car more closely. After a thorough examination, they nodded in approval, and Shin felt a rush of exhilaration. "All right, you've got a deal. We'll buy it," the man said as he retrieved a certified check from his suit. "Thank you, sir," Shin replied and began gathering the necessary paperwork in his car. However, as he glanced at the documents, a wave of nervousness washed over him. "Oh no, the car's documents still bear my name." The car's registration papers were still in his name. He felt his heart racing. "What's the matter, Mr. Salesman?" "Takuza," the man chuckled. "Sir," Shin struggled to find the right words. He realized his impatience had clouded his judgment, and he'd made a grave mistake. "Perhaps you can't figure out why this car isn't truly new," the woman, Erica, remarked. Shin trembled, realizing his deception had been uncovered. "Sir, ma'am, let me explain." Shin stammered, but before he could continue, Takuza interrupted. "It's all right. We'll forgive you. Frankly, we knew you were lying as soon as we saw the license plate," Takuza laughed. "Hehe, we're not as ignorant as you might have thought. You even raised the price of this affordable car, the Toyota Starlet." Erica joined in with a chuckle. Shin sighed in helplessness, having forgotten that critical detail. In his previous life, he might not have been involved in car procedures, as he had simply been a driver. However, a driver should have some basic knowledge about a car. Unfortunately, Shin had been complacent, working as a subordinate who didn't handle such matters and, instead, continued to serve his boss faithfully. "Why did you do that?" Erica inquired. Sighing, Shin replied, "I was desperate, needed money to fund my company plan." "Company plan? Starting a company at your age?" Takuza shook his head disapprovingly. Curious, Erica asked, "What kind of company are you starting?" "A game company," Shin admitted, slumping against the car door with a tinge of sadness. A game company? Takuza mused, exchanging glances with Erika. Yes, but I needed funds, Shin added, his voice tinged with despair. Takuza, appearing somewhat mocking, remarked, you seem pretty helpless. Maybe I'll buy your car for the original price of 420,000 yen, then. +++++++++++. Chapter 3, Myra. Shin had braced himself for the worst but wasn't prepared for the man's unexpected response. You want to buy my car? Shin turned his gaze toward the man. Takuza wore a warm smile as he extended his hand for a handshake. I'm Takuza Sato. Nice to meet you. Shin snapped out of his daze and accepted the handshake while asking, why? Takuza didn't immediately respond, and Erika, his fiancée, also introduced herself, saying, I'm Erika Tachibana. Nice to meet you. Shin shook hands with Erika after Takuza. Confused, Shin looked at them and asked, I almost deceived you, yet you're still willing to let me go. Takuza chuckled and replied, you almost deceived us? Don't make me laugh. We knew from the beginning you were a con artist. Erika nudged Takuza playfully and added, don't be too harsh. He tried. Suddenly, Shin couldn't contain his frustration and roared, then why? Why are you still buying my car at my initial price? He slammed his hand on the car's door in frustration. Oi, oi! Don't damage the car. Takuza shook his head, then he looked directly into Shin's eyes. To be honest, if you were selling this car just to buy a new one or material things, which are liabilities that keep people poor, I would have taken you to the police myself. Erika smiled as she held Takuza's hand, glancing at Shin with a compassionate look. Takuza continued, addressing Shin's confused expression, but when I heard that you wanted to sell this car, even if it meant deceiving us, so you could have assets to build a company's funds, I understood your situation. That's why I'm buying the car. Seeing Shin's surprise, Takuza explained, I'm not doing this out of pity. I'm investing in you. By purchasing this car and not reporting you to the police, I'm doing you a favor. So, my investment goes beyond this money alone. Takuza smiled as he elaborated, I'm investing in favors. You see this as a favor? Shin smiled, feeling a sense of relief inside. Erika chimed in, saying, exactly. That's why we're buying it. Just remember this favor. We'll call on it someday. Takuza nodded in agreement. I understand, Shin replied with a smile, and after completing the necessary paperwork, the car's ownership was transferred to Takuza. Shin left the bank after transferring the money to his bank account. Now that the funds are resolved by selling my car, I just need to find at least one person with electronics knowledge to help me build my prototype game console and program the Mario game, Shin thought. He needed to find someone affordable, of course. Shin knew he had the knowledge to program a Mario game that could surpass the original. He could divide sprites into multiple parts and use all those segments for graphics simultaneously, making it more efficient and manageable for his prototype game console. Additionally, he could break down each medal's smaller pixel graphics into sections, all usable at once. This would not only improve graphics efficiency but also reduce the game's size while enhancing pixel quality. With his knowledge as his advantage, he was even more motivated to create his prototype game console and Mario game. Now, I guess I'll have to look for someone interested in a part-time job at some university, Shin chuckled, realizing he still thought he had a car but had already sold it. An unfortunate memory lapse. He continued on his way with renewed determination. A young woman was on the hunt for a part-time job. The allowance she received from her parents back in the province simply couldn't cover her college expenses. Determined to find employment, she set her sights on a newly established fast food restaurant called McDo in the distance. Entering the restaurant with hopes of securing a part-time position, she was met with disappointment as the manager regretfully shook his head, explaining that all the spots were already filled. Feeling disheartened, Myra took a seat at a nearby table. She clutched the paper with job listings in her area, her eyes fixed on a particular offer that required electronic and programming skills, promising a pay of 5,000 yen. However, being only a first-year student in her computer engineering course, she felt hesitant about applying. A young man passing by noticed her and decided to strike up a conversation. He asked, "Can I sit here?" Myra glanced at him briefly and, without much enthusiasm, gave a slight nod. He inquired further, "I heard you earlier. Are you searching for jobs?" Myra turned to him, her irritation evident. "What? Is there something wrong with that?" The young man chuckled and shook his head. "Haha, of course not. There's nothing wrong with that." Myra snorted dismissively and replied, "Just mind your own business." Undeterred, the young man continued, "Actually, I'm hiring people." Myra was taken aback and turned her head to him, skeptical. "What?" She studied him closely, noting that he didn't even appear to be in college yet. She snorted, "Quit joking. I'm older than you." She refused to believe that someone so young could be hiring. She suspected, this has to be a con, an attempt to lure me into something shady. "I'm serious," the young man insisted, and, seeing that Myra was ignoring him, he produced a piece of paper and slid it in front of her. "What's this?" Myra asked, glancing at the company's name on the paper, which appeared to be an electronics company. "I'm Shinro Suzuki," the young man introduced himself. Myra remained wary and muttered, "Seems sketchy." She tossed the paper back at Shinro and accused him, "You're pretending to be someone you're not to try and deceive me. Is this some kind of ploy to hit on me?" Preparing to leave, she grabbed her bag. "Would you pass up an opportunity to earn 5,000 yen for just 5 hours of work a day?" Shinro smiled, attempting to entice her. Myra halted in her tracks, her gaze locked on Shinro. 5,000 yen for 5 hours. Shinro nodded, taking a sip of the coke he had bought. "What do you think?" he asked, looking directly into Myra's eyes. Flustered for a moment, Myra finally questioned, "Is this for real?" "Yes. If you meet the requirements listed on the paper, you're in," Shinro confirmed, retrieving the paper Myra had discarded earlier. Myra held the paper, scanning its contents. It specified that candidates should possess knowledge in electronics and programming languages. Her excitement grew, and she exclaimed, "This is exactly what I'm interested in." She held up the paper she had held before, which clearly indicated the job opening for someone with electronic and programming skills. Shinro smiled, thinking to himself, "Just as I expected." Chapter 4, Kishin Electronics. Several days had passed since Shin had prepared an advertisement for hiring someone with electronic and programming skills. He didn't mind if the person was a novice, as long as they could assist him in his task, he was open to it. Feeling weary, Shin decided to take a break at McDo for a moment. However, his attention was drawn to a young woman who had just been rejected for something. He found himself strangely interested, perhaps because the young woman appeared beautiful, youthful, yet carried an independent aura about her. As he observed, he noticed that the young woman was deeply engrossed in studying the advertisement he had prepared. This piqued his curiosity, making him think that she might possess the necessary skills for the job, given her focused scrutiny. Shin decided to strike up a conversation. For a moment, he couldn't believe that his initial hunch was accurate. It turned out the woman was indeed knowledgeable in electronics and programming, as she introduced herself as a computer engineer student. After Myra had introduced herself, she followed Shin to an apartment. Her heart raced, and she couldn't help but think that Shin's offer sounded too good to be true, especially for a first-year computer engineering student like herself. Are you really a scammer?" Myra nervously inquired. The building in front of her was clearly an old apartment, not a corporate office. Relax. I'm not running a con, Shin assured her, understanding her concerns. If you're not a con, then why are you taking me to your apartment? Myra retorted, preparing herself for the worst. My mother was right. Tokyo is nothing like the province. Shin chuckled, finding Myra's reaction endearing. Don't worry. I'm in the process of setting up my company, so I don't have an office building yet. Myra asked in surprise, you're just starting out? You mean? I'm your first employee. Shin chuckled again and nodded, saying, that's correct. Myra felt a bit foolish, not because she was pleased to be the first employee, but because it seemed unbelievable that she had even considered joining what could be an unreliable company. Myra bit her lower lip, hesitant about joining such a venture. Seeing her reaction, Shin said, don't worry. You won't be tied to the company as a full-time employee. Myra still hesitated. Observing her uncertainty, Shin added, if you're not comfortable with it, I won't force you. I'll find someone else for the job that pays 5,000 yen for 5 hours. He shook his head as if disappointed. No. Myra quickly shook her head. Let's go. I'll take it, she firmly decided. She really needed the money, so even if this turned out to be a trap, she had a pair of scissors in her bag. Her thought process may have seemed unreliable, but she didn't have much of a choice. Starvation was a worse alternative. They arrived at the front door of Shin's newly acquired apartment, which had the name Kishin Electronic written on it. Shin felt a sense of pride, while Myra couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. This is my company. Let's go, Shin said as he opened the door. Upon entering, Myra was taken aback to find a mess of electronic parts scattered on the floor. On the desk, there was a small desk lamp and a piece of paper that appeared to be a blueprint. Green circuit boards were strewn across the floor, along with various equipment, and a computer sat on the corner. Myra stared at this scene, momentarily speechless. What kind of rundown electronic company had she walked into? Shin smiled. This apartment room was rented for 30,000 yen a month, excluding bills, making it relatively cheap compared to other areas in Tokyo. It was an old-fashioned apartment, and that's why its price was lower to attract tenants. The computer alone cost 300,000 yen at the time, and Shin had been fortunate enough to already own one at home. He had it delivered to this apartment and acquired the materials, such as circuit boards and essential components like the CPU and PPU, for 8 to 10,000 yen. He purchased these parts from Tora Electronic, not his family's company, Suzuki Electronic, a subsidiary of the Suzuki Group. Shin knew that his father would disapprove of his venture. After leaving home, he had informed his mother and father of his intention to become independent, and while his mother seemed worried, she didn't try to stop him. Shin was well aware that his mother favored her first daughter. Myra glanced around the room, still dumbfounded. This is your company? Shin nodded confidently. Impressive, right? Myra had the urge to slap Shin and retorted, impressive? It's beyond miserable. Shin shrugged, unaffected by her opinion. He simply wanted her assistance to expedite his work. Myra sighed helplessly. I should have expected as much. What can you expect from a company located in an old apartment? Shin felt a pang of insult and retorted, humph. This won't be my situation forever. Someday, I'll own several buildings under Kishin Company. Myra chuckled. You must be a second-generation entrepreneur. You have quite an optimistic dream. Shin felt slightly irritated and reprimanded, is that how you talk to your boss? Sorry, boss, Myra said nonchalantly. All right, let's get started, Shin said as he sat in front of his computer. Now. Myra was momentarily bewildered. Of course, now. Shin said firmly as he rapidly typed on his keyboard. What can I do? Myra asked, feeling a bit embarrassed. Here. Examine this blueprint and follow the instructions written on it, Shin said, handing her the blueprint of the prototype gaming console. Blueprint. Myra stared at the blueprint with curiosity. That's the planned blueprint, essential for my company, Shin explained as he continued typing. It looks like a device, Myra observed, reading the labels and the detailed descriptions below them, such as CPU, PPU, or cartridge, each with its respective function. This device seems similar to those consoles used for playing ping pong or Tetris, Myra commented as she read the overall function of the device. But it's smaller. Shin nodded, surprised that she had noticed. Exactly. You're quite sharp. It seems you're competent. Myra snorted and said, of course. My course is computer engineering. I may be only a first-year student, but I already know this kind of stuff. She continued to examine the blueprint and deduced, you must be planning to open a game company. But I don't think you can create an interesting game other than those like ping pong, which won't really appeal to the average person since it's rather boring. Shin simply smiled at her comment. Chapter 5, finally completed. Shin was engrossed in programming a Mario game on his computer. To be honest, working with assembly language made everything feel more complex compared to the modern programming languages of the future. However, assembly language was the only option that would work for his first game console, similar to the NES or Nintendo Entertainment System. There was no way around it, so Shin pushed himself, programming tirelessly while occasionally slurping on a bowl of ramen. His fingers moved like lightning as he continued to type a stream of words and numbers onto his computer screen. After a brief coding session, he planned to move on to designing the necessary pixel images for the Mario game. The iconic green pipe in the game was divided into multiple sprite pieces to reduce memory usage and ease the burden on the game console. The same approach was taken for the background, where the image was divided into smaller tiles of meta tiles. Myra, meanwhile, occasionally observed Shin's work while focusing on her own task of assembling the prototype game console. She also took the opportunity to enhance her knowledge and skills while working alongside him. Several days had passed, and Myra decided to stay at Shin's apartment. It provided her with not only free food but also accommodation. However, being a girl, there were certain boundaries between them that they both respected. From time to time, Shin would switch roles with her, instructing her on what to do in programming before taking over. Myra was admittedly slower than Shin, but she admired his capabilities despite his young age. Shin would then set up the prototype game console, insert a test game, and connect it to the television he acquired recently. Myra watched curiously as the screen came to life. The screen displayed the Shin logo, which appeared rather plain to Myra. However, if someone from Shin's previous life were present, they might have noticed the similarity to Nintendo's logo in font and style. The Mario game started, although it lacked sound and a stable background. Mario was already running, and Myra couldn't help but be intrigued. "Is this your game?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the screen where Mario was on an adventure. "Yes," Shin replied as he controlled the character on the screen. He seemed content with the progress. Mario. Myra read the title and found the concept interesting but wondered if it would succeed in the market. Shin played for a while and then smiled. "It seems like there are no issues with the game console. Now we just need to create the game itself." Myra was genuinely interested and asked, "Can I try?" She felt a bit embarrassed about asking. "Have you finished your tasks?" Shin inquired as he glanced at her computer screen. "Of course. Look, I've completed hundreds of lines of code," Myra proudly responded, showing her work on the computer screen to Shin, who nodded and handed her the game console controller. As she took over, Myra tried to control Mario and felt an unusual sense of joy. "This is definitely more interesting than a simple ping-pong or Tetris game." She nodded while observing the game. "It's not just black and white, it's in color." Then something struck her. "Wait, this game, we created it. Shin chuckled at her reaction. Don't be too shocked, it's not the finished product yet. Myra pouted, feeling a bit annoyed. Humph, you act like you're older than me. Besides, I'm not shocked, I'm just happy to have achieved something at work. Shin shrugged, pointed at the game console, and said, we still need to design a casing for our company's game console. Myra snapped out of her thoughts and nodded. What's the name of this console, Shin? Isn't it Kishin? Shin replied without looking at her. Yes, but this game console is the first model, and it should have a separate name, Myra explained. Shin paused his typing and thought for a moment. A name? Hey. I thought about naming it Nintendo, but I might get in trouble with copyright, especially since I've already borrowed Mario. Myra turned to Shin, curious about his thoughts. Shin met her gaze and said, Ctto. Myra was momentarily flustered and didn't catch his words. What? Shin redirected his attention to the computer and continued typing. I said the name of our company's game console is Ctto. Ctto, hey. Myra nodded as she muttered the name. She wondered if it held a special meaning for Shin. Shin smiled as he felt a sense of nostalgia and melancholy. Life. That was what it meant. Shin had a deep meaning for choosing the name, and it symbolized the second chance at life he had been granted. From now on, he wouldn't live passively and as a mere pawn in life, as he had in his previous existence. This new life was a blessing, and he intended to make the most of it. Shin was determined to bring the joy of games to this world, along with the pain and challenges they could offer. They would experience joy, happiness, and the thrill of gaming. They would also experience pain, frustration, and the lows of defeat. Shin believed that these emotions, whether positive or negative, were what made gaming so fascinating and captivating. This world should experience the frustration of a losing streak too. Shin thought with a hint of resentment. He still vividly remembered the anger and frustration of losing in online games, to the point of breaking his keyboard. He was determined to bring those emotions to this world. After several weeks of relentless effort, the first Mario game was finally completed. Shin couldn't contain his joy and exclaimed, finally. Thank the heavens, it's finished. Myra had been asleep due to the grueling work she put in to finalize the game console. She had pulled an all-nighter, despite the specific requirement of only working for 5 hours to earn her salary. However, the timing of her work hours was random, and with her university responsibilities during the day, she had no choice but to work at night. She remembered how hard Shin had been working, his eyes red from exhaustion, and felt a sense of guilt for not being able to assist him more. Even though the first and second game console was completed with the components already all used, Shin decided to purchase new components to assemble 5 more. There had to be a reason for this, so Myra simply focused on her tasks. Shin was on the verge of tears of happiness when he completed the project. He knew he lacked some of the modern equipment he had in his previous life, and in 1990, using a computer like IBM without a drawing tablet was a challenge. He had to create all the pixel images using just a mouse, and it had been quite a struggle. While Myra couldn't stay awake any longer and had fallen asleep, Shin couldn't help but grin with satisfaction. I'm going to become the Game Tycoon King. Shin raised his fist triumphantly, mimicking Luffy's spirited actions and echoing his words. Myra was abruptly awakened by Shin's shout and turned her gaze towards him. Panic surged through her when she saw him collapse, his head landing on the keyboard. Shin. She used his nickname, Shinro, a sign of their growing closeness. Upon realizing that Shin was merely snoring, she let out a sigh of relief. Thank goodness! Afterward, she found herself staring at Shin's peaceful sleeping face. Myra couldn't help but smirk and whispered to herself, he's such a boring guy. All he does is work, and now he's overworked himself. She glanced at Shin's thin lips and shook her head. No. I'm a sensible woman. She forced those distracting thoughts out of her mind. Sleep well, Shin. You're the most diligent third-generation person I know, Myra said with a touch of amusement as she covered him with a blanket. However, as her hand brushed against Shin's forehead, she suddenly stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening. Tears welled up in Myra's eyes as she felt the feverish heat radiating from Shin's body. She whispered with concern, "Shin. Are you sick?" Her trembling hand touched his hot forehead, and worry washed over her. Chapter 6, Love's Gentle Breeze. Shin felt his body burning, yet he simultaneously experienced a chilling sensation. As he slowly opened his eyes, Shin thought, "I'm so fatigued." Only to find himself in an unfamiliar place. "Where am I?" Shin muttered, lying on a soft bed, quite different from his old apartments. "You're awake." A female voice reached his ears, and he turned to see Myra sitting beside him. "Where are we?" Shin asked with confusion evident on his face. Myra sighed in relief and inquired, "You don't remember what happened?" Seeing Shin's bewildered expression, furrowing his brows, Shin asked, "What happened?" While scanning the unfamiliar surroundings, Myra sighed helplessly and said, "After you finished programming your game, Mario, you fainted while shouting, 'I want to become a game tycoon king,' remember?" She chuckled at the memory. Blushing a little, Shin finally remembered that before succumbing to fatigue, he had indeed shouted those words and then fell into a deep slumber. He recollected pushing himself to the limit to complete the game that day. "I remember now." Shin nodded and attempted to get up, but Myra stopped him. "Don't move. The doctor said you need some rest," she insisted, gently pushing him back onto the bed. "Don't worry about me, I'm fine now," Shin tried to convince Myra. "No. You need to rest for a few days," Myra firmly asserted. Shin hesitated, whispering to Myra's ear, "Listen, Myra, we won't be able to afford the hospital fees here. Let's go." Blushing and flustered by their proximity, Myra created some distance, saying, "Don't worry, you can deduct it from my salary." Surprised by her words, Shin quickly shook his head, saying, "No, I can't let my one and only employee suffer," though her words warmed his heart. Myra wanted to persuade him further, but Shin's next words convinced her. "My sickness shouldn't be too bad. I'm just fatigued. I can rest at our company office," Shin smiled. Myra sighed and stopped persuading, "All right," even though she knew that the so-called company office was simply his old apartment. "This guy is so pretentious as always," she thought. She helped Shin stand up, and when they got close, both Myra and Shin blushed and felt flustered. Afterward, they informed the doctor of Shin's leave and received a prescription for his medication. Upon returning to the apartment, Shin rushed to the computer. "I thought you were going to rest here." Myra felt annoyed and betrayed by Shin's stubbornness. "Don't worry too much. I just want to check if the game was saved," Shin reassured her, his voice tinged with worry that his days of hard work might go to waste if it wasn't saved on the memory cartridge. "Don't worry, the game is already saved on the cartridge," Myra said as she handed it to him. Shin inserted it into the game console cartridge slot while Myra shook her head at his impatience. "Can you also plug in the TV?" Shin asked, a bit embarrassed. "Ugh, all right," Myra sighed and plugged in the TV. "And the Ctto too," Shin added. Myra let out a sigh, feeling helpless as she realized she had to comply. Not only was she Shin's employee, but Shin was also battling an illness, so she reluctantly went along with it. The television screen flickered to life, displaying the Shin logo. Nostalgic and familiar to Shin's ears, the simple audio of Mario filled the room. Sitting on the floor by the bed, Myra watched the game with a curious expression. "Did you hear that? I've added sound effects and music to our company's game too," Shin proudly exclaimed, to which Myra responded with an eye roll. On the screen, Mario leaped, accompanied by the jumping sound effects, while catchy music played in the background. Myra had to admit that she enjoyed watching the game, she was captivated by the sound effects and music too. So, this is what you've been working on for days. Myra gazed at Shin with a smile. Her heart raced, and she felt herself falling for Shin. No. You can't. Shin is like my younger brother. She tried to shift her thoughts by focusing on the game screen, but the idea of a future with Shin kept invading her mind. Her gaze returned to Shin's face, and the more she looked, the deeper she fell. Her heart pounded, and her cheeks turned as red as a tomato. Shin! She thought as her eyes remained locked on his face. Satisfied with the results, Shin muttered, "Good," but he sensed someone staring at him. He turned to find Myra gazing at him with a dazed expression, her face blushing like a ripe tomato. This distraction caused Shin to lose in Mario. Several seconds passed, and Myra snapped out of her thoughts. She finally realized that Shin was staring back at her with dreamy eyes. Oh no, she became flustered and turned away from Shin. Shin struggled to find words, and the situation grew increasingly awkward. It's so embarrassing. I wish I could hide. I'd rather dig a hole and bury myself alive. Myra thought, her hands touching her burning cheeks, which felt hot to the touch. Shin didn't know how to handle the situation. He had been a loner in his previous life, never experiencing close relationships with women, ultimately dying alone. Now, in this new life, he had a chance at a different experience, but his shyness made the situation even more awkward. No. This is his new life now. He has to be braver and bolder. Shin gulped nervously and resolved to be more resolute. So, he decided to initiate a conversation first. So, our first company product is officially complete. Shin changed the topic, which Myra also appreciated. She smiled and made an effort to meet Shin's gaze. They exchanged smiles. PFFTTT. Hee hee, ha ha ha. Shin couldn't control his laughter as he recalled Myra's captivated expression. He pointed at Myra and said, "Looks like you've fallen for me? Ha ha. I thought you were the older and more mature one? Ha ha ha." Myra's smile turned into a pout as she exclaimed, "Who would ever fall for you? You're dirty, silly, and downright boring." She then wrapped herself in a blanket that still bore Shin's scent, getting lost in her fantasy again before quickly shaking off the distracting thoughts. Ha ha ha, come on, admit it. You've already fallen for me. Shin laughed, teasing Myra, though he was actually mostly serious, with just a touch of humor. From the moment he laid eyes on her, he had taken a liking to Myra. Yet fate has a curious way of working. He was smitten at first sight, but little did he know that she would fall even deeper once they got to know each other. Chapter 7, Target Audience. At Kishin Electronics, or rather, in what looked more like an old apartment, a few days had passed, and Shin had already recovered from his sickness. On the floor, 6 video game consoles were neatly lined up, bearing the name Ctto. Their design resembled that of Nintendo's first console, featuring a red and white casing. Myra gazed at the setup, noticing the 12 controllers, which were small, red, and white, reminiscent of the NES controllers from Shin's previous life. "Now that we've finished it, what's next?" Myra inquired, her thoughtful gaze shifting to Shin. "Do you already have a plan in mind?" With confidence, Shin smiled and replied, "Of course. I've already planned everything out. I've even put it in writing." Curious, Myra pressed, "So, what's the plan?" "I'm quite interested to know more about your ideas, Shin." Shin simply smiled and approached the game consoles. Kneeling down, he gently touched the console's casing. Myra observed the scene with keen interest. "Do you remember what we used to do most when we were children?" Shin asked Myra with a warm smile. Myra furrowed her brow in thought and then replied, "I don't recall all the details, but I remember playing a lot when I was a child." After a moment, her eyes widened as realization dawned. Are you thinking? Shin nodded, confirming her suspicion. Exactly. Children will be our first target audience. Myra wasn't entirely surprised by this revelation, considering that the Super Mario game she had just played was clearly suitable for children. However, she was puzzled why Shin referred to them as an audience rather than customers. Why call them an audience and not customers? Myra inquired, assuming that children would be the first to purchase their product. While she didn't know the exact price of the game console, as Shin would be the one to determine its price, she believed Shin would keep it affordable for children, knowing that parents had to approve. Shin held one of the game console controllers in his hand, deep in thought. They're not just customers. With their help, they can spread the word about our Ctto game console to their parents. Myra nodded in understanding and asked, how do we go about doing that? Shin grinned and explained, the children will be the first to play our Ctto, aside from us. We'll set up near the kindergarten school and install our television and Ctto there. Myra sighed, expressing her slight annoyance. It sounds like quite the hassle, Shin. Hold on for a bit. There's a nearby park just near to a kindergarten, and will attract children to come and play, Shin reassured her. He then retrieved a stack of stickers he had prepared the day before. These are Kishin Star stickers. The one who completes the most Super Mario stages will be awarded a rare golden sticker, while the others who do well will receive a consolation sticker. He handed a sticker to Myra. Myra examined the stickers, which were red and white. She couldn't help but think that they might not be very tempting to children. Nevertheless, she decided to go along with Shin's plan. They hoisted the TV and the single game console, the product they intended for the children to sample. Shin and Myra were catching their breaths. Fortunately, despite the age of the apartment building, the elevator was functional, otherwise, their task would have been much more cumbersome. Shin then fetched a hand truck and placed the TV on it, eliciting a sigh of relief from Myra. As they walked a bit further, Myra couldn't help but complain, I thought it was closer. Be patient. We're almost there, Shin reassured her, and then, he pointed with excitement, there. He gestured toward the children playing at the nearby park, situated conveniently close to the kindergarten and elementary school. This was at Minami Ikebukuro Park in Toshima Ward. Shin and Myra transported the TV and game console to an unoccupied chair, then set up their power generator to run the TV and the game console. Hey, look! Other children finally noticed and pointed in their direction. They have a television. Wow! Maybe they're going to play a movie. Yay! Big brother and big sister, what movie are you playing? Myra felt somewhat helpless, but she replied, no, we're not starting a movie. Boring. Disappointed sighs filled the air, and Myra's annoyance grew. She thought to herself resentfully, these kids have no idea how much trouble Shin and I went through just to entertain them. It's not a movie, but it's even more interesting than a movie, Shin chimed in quickly, noticing the children's disappointment. Really? More interesting than a movie? I want to see. I want to see. The group of children grew curious and excited, cheering their interest. Shin smiled and declared, all right, kids. Big brother will show you. He inserted the Super Mario cartridge into the console, and the Kishin logo appeared. Then, Super Mario officially graced the public. The Super Mario theme song filled the air. The children stared at the TV with wide, shining eyes. Wow! A cartoon! They exclaimed, seeing the colorful Super Mario. They initially thought the surprise might be a simple cartoon show, but Shin had something more in store. Shin controlled the game using the controller, and the game began. After several minutes, the children realized that the cartoon character on the TV screen was under Shin's control, guided by the movements of the controller. A few adults who had been exercising in the park noticed the commotion of children gathering around something and approached curiously. They saw a young man staring at a TV displaying a colorful cartoon. They didn't think it was anything special and considered the cartoon rather dull, especially for it to capture the attention of the children. One of the adults asked some of the children, "Why are all of you so focused on that cartoon with a dwarf character jumping around and running? Isn't it boring?" The children shook their heads and replied, "You're wrong. It's not boring." The man playfully teased, "Really? This cartoon? It looks so boring." Another child chimed in, retorting, "You're wrong, mister. It's not a cartoon." The man and the other adults were taken aback. "Not a cartoon?" The child shook his head and explained, "It's a game. Look. Big Brother is controlling the dwarf character." The adults finally noticed the controller in Shin's hands. "Is that so? It's similar to ping pong or Tetris. But this looks more interesting," a woman thoughtfully commented, and the other adults around her nodded in agreement. Shin intentionally lost the game and was about to reveal his purpose to the children, but he noticed that some adults were watching with interest. "Kids, you have a chance to play our company's video game console, Ctto, if you line up properly," Shin announced, making sure to mention that it was their company's product for the benefit of the listening adults. The children cheered and formed a line, though some chaos ensued. Shin and Myra managed to calm them down. The first player, a child named Hiro, eagerly took the controller and began playing with excitement. His Mario character faced setbacks and occasional defeats, but he learned and improved. Eventually, he faced a game over. Hiro felt a moment of sadness, but Shin comforted him, saying, "Wow! You've done well. What's your name, kid?" "I'm Hiro," he introduced himself. "All right, Hiro, since you're the first player and you played well, even reaching the second stage, you'll receive this sticker." Shin handed Hiro a sticker, one with the design of Kishin First Gamer, and the other with a Mario hat logo and the words, "Wow! You've reached the second stage. Good job." Although Hiro was initially frustrated and on the verge of tears, the stickers were like badges of recognition, and they managed to cheer him up a bit. Chapter 8, Ikebaro Entertainment Center. The children formed a line to play while the adults observed the scene, intrigued but hesitant to join in. They didn't want to be seen as children, this was an activity reserved for the younger generation. As the sun began to set, it was finally time to head home. Myra watched Shin as he carefully loaded the TV onto the hand truck and carried the gaming console. "Hey, I understand that you want to spread the word about our game consoles and games, but I'm concerned that we won't benefit much even if they become popular, considering we don't have enough game consoles and cartridges," Myra expressed her worries to Shin. Shin smiled confidently and replied, "I understand your concern. But you'll soon see why I'm doing this." When Hiro returned home, he excitedly told his father, who was still in his work formal suit, about his day. "Dad, I just played a game at the park, and it was so much fun." Hiro's mother pinched his cheeks and asked, "Really? What kind of game did you play?" Before Hiro could answer, his father, Taki, chimed in, "Did you play hide and seek?" Hiro shook his head, his excitement bubbling over. "No. I played a game on a TV." "On a TV?" Taki furrowed his brows, his curiosity piqued. "Yes. There was a TV and a controller. I controlled a character on the TV, and I defeated a boss." Hiro enthusiastically recounted his experience at the park. Early in the morning, Shin woke up and dialed a number on his phone. "Are you the CEO of Kishin Electronic?" A middle-aged man's voice came through the phone. Shin replied, "Yes, I'm Shinro Suzuki. Is this Manager Han?" "Yes, and you must be the one who rented space at our Ikebaro Entertainment Center?" Manager Han's voice inquired. Shin smiled. This Ikebaro Entertainment Center had been experiencing declining profits, mainly due to a lack of interest in their offerings except for pachinko and gasapon. Some vacant spaces were available for rent. Yes, Shin confirmed before adding, it's 7,000 yen per day, correct? That's correct, Manager Han replied before issuing a disclaimer. I must inform you that I won't be responsible if you experience any losses at our establishment, sir. I understand, Shin nodded and hummed in agreement. Oh, you can find all the details in the contract, my apologies. Goodbye, Manager Han concluded, bidding farewell. Goodbye, Shin replied before ending the call. He sighed and retrieved a notebook from his desk, which contained detailed notes about various matters he had been handling. Morning, Shin, Myra's voice greeted him from behind, and Shin replied, Good morning, Myra. Who was on the phone? Myra inquired, glancing at Shin's phone. You'll find out later, Shin replied nonchalantly as he took a seat in front of the TV. Myra looked concerned. You're not suggesting that we have to transport this TV to the park again, are you? I really don't want to go through that hassle. Shin chuckled and assured her, No, don't worry. We won't be going back there. Myra was surprised by this unexpected response. She asked, But I thought you wanted to fully promote our game console and game through word of mouth. Shin nodded, then shook his head slightly. You're partly right and partly wrong, he clarified, using 2 fingers to emphasize his point. Myra was puzzled and confident that she was entirely correct. What do you mean? She asked, seeking clarification. You're partly right about wanting to spread the word about our product, but it's not my only goal, Shin explained. He then shook his head and elaborated, We won't overly promote our product for now. We won't benefit much from that at the moment. The initial word of mouth is the most crucial and effective. Myra was still perplexed. Shin continued, I've already rented a vacant space at the Ikebaro Entertainment Center. Soon, those who have seen or heard about our product will seek us out there. Myra was surprised by this revelation. So you've already rented a place there. But why? Isn't it obvious? I've already prepared the coin-operated machines, and all we need is a game console. People who have witnessed or heard about our product will search for us there, Shin explained, his attention still on playing Mario. Ah, I see. You want to make money from the coin-operated machines. Myra nodded in understanding but still had some lingering confusion. She asked, But how will they know our game console is at the Ikebaro Entertainment Center? Shin chuckled at her question and replied, Remember the sticker? Myra nodded, remembering the sticker but not grasping its full significance. The consolation sticker badge have the Ikebaro Entertainment Center logo on the front, Shin explained with a smile, and on the unopened back, it has the map or address of our location within the Ikebaro Entertainment Center. It's a subtle advertisement that will guide them to us. The golden sticker star badge, earned by the player who completes the most Mario stages, will even grant them the privilege of playing for free on one of our game consoles for an hour each day. That golden star badge will remain valid permanently as long as the game machines are under the control of Kishin Electronics, Shin explained, a smile on his face. Myra finally grasped the concept. Is that all? What's so mysterious about it? This guy always acts so pretentious, she thought, but secretly, she appreciated it when Shin shared his ideas and plans with her. Shin and Myra ventured to the Ikebaro Entertainment Center. As they stepped inside the building, they were pleasantly surprised by the spaciousness of the place, exceeding their expectations. Amid the constant flow of people, they noticed that the section housing pachinko and gasapon machines remained bustling with activity. However, the area with the large ping-pong and black and white arcade games appeared abandoned. Shin observed workers dismantling these machines while new ones, prepared by Shin himself for his video gaming, were being installed. They also noticed a television that merely required some setup for their game consoles. Sharing a meaningful glance and a nod, Shin and Myra unpacked their 6 game consoles and approached the coin-operated machine. Are you Mr. Suzuki? inquired one of the workers. Shin nodded, prompting the worker to bow formally and then unlock the coin-operated machine. With this, Shin and Myra connected their game consoles to the TV within the coin-operated machine. Chapter 9, Manager Han. In the office of Ikeburo Entertainment, a middle-aged man cast a glance at the gaming machine that featured ping pong and Tetris, recently relocated to his office by his diligent workers. This man was Lee Han, a Korean who had ventured to Japan in 1985 for work. Through his intelligence and diligence, he had ascended to the position of manager at Ikeburo Entertainment. Lee Han's gaze fell upon the game machine that now resided in his office, and his eyes welled with a sense of melancholy. As the workers completed the transportation task and exited, Lee Han let out a sigh. It's not as popular now, but I still remember the days when it captured people's attention in the 60s. Now it has become a relic of the past, he lamented in Korean, his hand caressing the game machine with nostalgia. In that moment, his memories transported him back to the past, and the voice of his childhood echoed in his mind. "Papa! Let's play Tetris!" he had said to his father, who responded with laughter. "Tetris? Hee, but I prefer a round of ping-pong," his father had replied. "All right. Let's play ping-pong," echoed Lee Han's youthful voice. A smile crept onto Lee Han's face as he relished the memory. He had placed this game machine in Ikeburo Entertainment a year ago when he became the manager. However, until now, not a single soul had ventured to play it recently. In fact, the sole player had been Lee Han himself, indulging in it during his scarce free moments. A few brave souls had attempted to play, but none had returned for a second round. Due to this, the higher UPS had instructed him to remove it and seek out a new tenant for the vacant spot. And so, a company named Kishin Electronic had taken over the space. From what Lee Han had heard, they also dealt in game machines, possibly featuring games similar to Tetris or ping pong. Curiosity piqued, Lee Han left his office to investigate it for himself. Shin and Myra successfully set up the game consoles on the coin-operated machine. Shin took a seat in front of it to test the system. Unbeknownst to them, a middle-aged man in a formal suit approached. It was Lee Han. Lee Han couldn't help but be curious as he saw the young man holding a controller, engrossed in the game on the screen. He watched as a 2D pixelated character leaped, ran, and tackled monsters, all while entering pipes. As Lee Han continued to observe, he became increasingly captivated. Unable to contain his enthusiasm, he asked, "Young man, may I give it a try?" Shin and Myra turned to Lee Han. Myra had noticed him watching from the beginning, but she hadn't expected such interest from a middle-aged man. Lee Han snapped out of his reverie, realizing his abruptness. He apologized, "I'm sorry for my rudeness. I'm Lee Han, the manager of Ikeburo Entertainment Center," bowing as he introduced himself. Shin nodded and said, "I'm Shinro Suzuki, the one you called earlier." "So, you're Manager Han?" Shin smiled and asked, "You'd like to try playing?" Lee Han smiled humbly and said, "If I'm not intruding, I'd love to experience it." Shin chuckled and assured him, "Hee, Manager Han, it's no problem at all. This video game machine is for everyone, but it does require some coins." Shin continued to sit and play the game. Lee Han waited for Shin to stand up, assuming they'd switch places, but after a minute, Shin was still engrossed in the game. Lee Han hesitated before awkwardly asking, "Can I try now, Mr. Suzuki?" He thought that Shin might have forgotten. Shin was a bit surprised and asked, "Manager Han, were you waiting for me to finish?" Lee Han awkwardly replied, "Weren't you going to switch with me?" Shin shook his head with a laugh and explained, "Haha, I forgot to mention that there are identical game machines right here," pointing at the adjacent one. "This one," he gestured, "and these 5 others are the same as the one I'm playing. You can just insert a coin, and it will start." Myra chuckled, realizing Shin had been mischievous, intentionally omitting this information. Li Han felt embarrassed and said, "Ah, forgive me, I didn't know." He quickly took a seat in front of the video game machine, inserting a coin. The game started, playing a cheerful Mario theme, and Li Han, initially unfamiliar with the controller, began experimenting. It turned out to be intuitive, with the buttons corresponding to their expected functions. Li Han observed Shin playing, learning from his actions, and soon grasped the controls. He read the game's title, Super Mario, and dived into playing. Li Han felt like a child once more, just as fascinated as he had been with Tetris in his youth. A single tear welled up in his eye. Myra noticed this and nudged Shin. Shin looked at her, and she pointed at Li Han. Shin approached the manager and asked, "Do you like the game?" Li Han snapped out of his reverie, nodded joyfully, and said, "I love it." Shin smiled in appreciation and inquired, "Do you think others will feel the same?" Li Han replied confidently, "Certainly." He then realized that Shin was talking to him and awkwardly added, "Oh, it's you, Mr. Suzuki." He was speaking without realizing it. Shin nodded and remarked, "It's a shame that few people visit this section, most prefer pachinko or gasapon." Li Han agreed, saying, "Don't worry, Mr. Suzuki. This game won't collect dust for long. Many people will love it." Shin smiled and replied, "I believe so." Li Han adjusted his glasses and asked, "Would you be interested in selling this game machine to us, Mr. Suzuki?" Shin and Myra exchanged glances, and Shin showed interest. "How much are you offering, Manager Han?" Li Han raised 3 fingers and proposed, "How about 30,000 yen?" Shin smiled in response. However, Li Han noticed Shin's expression and asked, "What do you think, Mr. Suzuki?" He wanted these game machines, not just for profit but for himself, sensing their potential popularity. Shin shook his head with a smile and said, "Thank you for the offer, Manager Han. But I have to decline." Li Han was disappointed. "Is the price too low? Should I raise it?" Li Han inquired. Shin shook his head again, explaining, "Even if the price were higher, I'd still have to say no. I won't sell these game machines at the moment." Li Han sighed but was not too disheartened. "I won't press you, then," he said. He sensed that there might be a chance to acquire them in the future. Chapter 10, Myra's Doubt. As they strolled along, Myra inquired of Shin, "Are you genuinely confident that those children who received stickers will actually become aware of our game machine at Ikeburo Entertainment?" Shin shook his head and admitted, "No, I'm not sure at all. I was running low on budget, so I took a gamble with those stickers. I have no idea if those youngsters will even notice them." In frustration, Myra grabbed Shin and exclaimed, "Then why did you appear so sure about it? You basically took a risky chance without any real plan." Shin laughed at her reaction and replied, "Don't fret. Even if they don't catch on, I'll ensure they find out." Myra winced and argued, "Find out? If this doesn't work, we'll soon run out of funds." Shin chuckled and playfully teased, Hey, you're just an employee, right? How come you're more concerned about the company's fate than I am, the CEO and owner?" Myra snapped back to reality, growing embarrassed. She defended herself, "Well, I'm your employee, part of the company, so I have a stake in it. If the company goes bankrupt, I'll lose my job, you know." She avoided Shin's gaze as she spoke. Shin shook his head and continued to tease, "Really? Don't worry too much. If I go bankrupt, you can always find another job," he said with a shrug. Myra pouted and retorted, "Find another job? Of course, I can. But it won't be as generous as your offer." Shin grinned and challenged, "Is that so? I've seen some job listings that seem more generous than me." Myra became irritated and huffed, explaining, "Humph. Who knows if those are sketchy? It's so risky these days. Wait, why am I even justifying myself? She huffed and changed the subject, asking, you mentioned you'll ensure they find out? Can you elaborate? Shin chuckled at her reaction, nodded, and said, to guarantee they become aware, we'll visit the park again. We'll pass by it as we walk. Myra nodded and remarked, no wonder you didn't call for a taxi. A group of children, accompanied by a few adults, waited in anticipation to see if Shin and Myra would once again bring the video game console and TV. Many of the children in the group had Kishin stickers affixed to their bags or belongings, although some hadn't used them yet. Their excitement grew as Shin and Myra approached the park. Upon their arrival, the children exclaimed, brother! Sister! Can we play Mario again? Let's play! Yay! Shin smiled, delighted by the children's enthusiasm. He noticed that some adults were secretly eavesdropping, and some children were accompanied by their fathers or mothers. Shin spoke up, saying, if any of you would like to play again, you can ask your parents to take you to Ikeburo Entertainment. Among the children, there were more elementary students than kindergartners. Some of the younger children didn't fully grasp the situation, but the elementary students chimed in, Ikeburo Entertainment? I've been there before. Shin nodded and continued, you can find it in the section with coin-operated machines. If you can't locate it, just check the back of the unopened sticker for its specific location, the map is already printed there. Taki, Hiro's father, turned to Shin with a question, so, the children won't be able to play here at the park for free anymore? Taki had come to the park out of curiosity to see the video games but hadn't expected that they wouldn't be available for free anymore. Shin nodded but reassured him, that's right, but those who received the golden Kishin sticker badge can play for 1 hour for free at one of our game machines at Ikeburo Entertainment. Taki was puzzled and asked, golden Kishin sticker? Hiro nudged Taki, proudly presenting his sticker, and said, Dad, look. I have one. A golden sticker after playing a second time. Taki examined the golden sticker in Hiro's hand, which bore the company logo and the Ikeburo Entertainment logo, recognizable to him as he had been to the entertainment building before. Some other children also had the golden stickers, and those who came with their parents eagerly showed them off. Hiro pleaded with Taki, Dad, let's go there. I want to play Super Mario. Taki, curious to see the video game that had captivated his son, readily agreed. Other children who had made the same request received similar responses from their parents. Shin smiled, satisfied that everything was clear. He added, that's all I came to announce to let the children know that we won't be coming here again to offer free play on our video games. Some of the children looked disappointed. But at Ikeburo Entertainment, there are 6 video game machines you can play, Shin said with a grin. Upon hearing this, the children's spirits lifted, and they were eager to head to Ikeburo Entertainment. Some adults who had been exercising also overheard and were keen to give Super Mario a try. Shin glanced at Myra and remarked, you see? I told you everything would turn out fine. Myra snorted dismissively, saying, humph. Don't get too cocky. We can't be certain it's going to work. Shin chuckled and responded, even if you didn't have faith in me, have faith in the process. Myra continued to pout and huff, but Shin found her adorable, and he couldn't help but smile. Meanwhile, at Ikeburo Entertainment, a few hours had passed since Shin and Myra had left. Lee Han scrutinized the earnings report and noted that Kishin video games hadn't generated any revenue for the day, except when he had played it. He shook his head, thinking, people must have assumed the game machine was just boring Tetris and ping pong. Little did he know that after Shin had informed the children and some adults, he was in for a surprise, especially since it was Sunday the next day. Chapter 11, The New Arcade Game That Will Trend. Shin experienced losses in the rental income from Ikeburo Entertainment since only a few people had visited the previous day. However, this Sunday, Shin anticipated a change, especially after personally informing the children about it. He continued to work on programming his computer, with his current budget standing at 183,000 yen. With a sigh, he returned to his programming, working on a new game he was developing for Ctto. Despite the initial setbacks, he was confident that his video game consoles at Ikeburo Entertainment would generate income, considering that players needed to insert 10 yen every 2 minutes. For every hour, each video game console would earn 300 yen, totaling 7,200 yen per day. Shin had secured 6 vacancies for his game consoles at Ikeburo Entertainment, costing him 7,000 yen a day. He was about 70% sure that they would turn a profit today, given that he had informed the people, mostly children, at the park the previous afternoon. Once the word got out, the money would start flowing. Shin also appreciated the advanced technology in this world compared to his previous life in 1990. The components required for his game console were much cheaper here, with each video game console costing only around 6,800 yen. With this in mind, Shin dialed a number, and the phone rang until a man answered. "Hello, this is Kenji Tanaka, sales agent of Tora Electronics speaking," a voice said. "This is Shinro Suzuki. I'd like to place an order for a few components, the same as last time," Shin requested. "Oh, it's Mr. Suzuki. Can you please specify your orders?" Kenji inquired. Shin listed the components he needed in a series of words. "That will amount to 17,300 yen, plus a delivery fee of 500 yen, making it a total of 17,800 yen, sir," Kenji confirmed. "All right," Shin confirmed before ending the call. Meanwhile, Myra had just woken up, yawned, and made her way to the kitchen. "Morning, Shin. Would you like beef ramen with eggs?" she asked cheerfully. Shin nodded happily and then remarked, "It's Sunday, your supposed day off, but we might get busy later." Myra looked confused. "Why?" she inquired. Shin explained, "I ordered electronic components again to build video game consoles." Myra questioned, "Why? We're not even making money at Ikeburo Entertainment yet. I just want to be prepared. Remember, we informed everyone at the park yesterday afternoon, so we might earn today. Then there might not be enough video game consoles available," Shin explained simply. Myra wondered aloud, "How can you be so sure?" Shin replied with a confident smile, "I'm just preparing for the future." Myra couldn't help but feel a hint of exasperation in response. Shin smiled reassuringly and said, "Don't worry. I've only purchased enough components to assemble 3 video game consoles." At Ikeburo Entertainment Center, Lee Han went to fetch coffee early in the morning and planned to try playing Super Mario. He had already prepared a bunch of coins. However, he was surprised to find that the video game consoles were already occupied by other players. All 6 video game consoles were occupied by kids, with other children standing behind them, watching intently. Lee Han had expected the video game consoles to become popular, but he didn't anticipate it happening so quickly. To his surprise, there were even some adults watching from the sidelines. "Is this for real?" Lee Han couldn't believe his eyes. "No. Go over there. There's a secret box," one boy exclaimed. "I'm the one playing. Don't boss me around. Because you're not very good." Lee Han overheard the kids' lively chatter, and the atmosphere was filled with excitement. Lee Han didn't feel frustrated about not being able to play a game, instead, he simply sipped his coffee with a smile. "I thought we were going there, Dad." Hiro pouted and exclaimed. Taki nodded and said, "All right, we'll go there." "Really? Yay!" Similar situations were unfolding in several households. Maki was currently watching a child play Super Mario, feeling frustrated that she hadn't arrived earlier. She had stumbled upon the video game console set up by the young man while exercising at the park. When she returned, the young man was nowhere to be found, but she learned that the video game console could be played at Ctto Entertainment Center. Curiosity drove her to give it a try. Finally, after a long wait, the child playing the game stood up. Maki immediately took the seat and inserted her 10-yen coin. Other kids who had been watching were disappointed. With excitement, Maki mimicked the kid's controller movements and skillfully guided Mario through the game. She was having a great time. Now, alongside watching soap operas, she had found another source of entertainment in these video games. Li Han dialed a number. "Hello, this is Li Han." With a smile, he called Shin's number, eager to inform him that many people were enjoying his video game consoles. "Oh, Manager Han. What's the matter?" Shin's voice sounded on the other end. I saw a review questioning whether this novel is a translation or a complete copy-paste. Before reaching such a conclusion, you should either read the Chinese novel that inspired this one or wait for more chapters of this novel to be released. I must admit there are similarities, but it's not a copy-paste. The upcoming chapters of the novel will also introduce a different approach or plot. Chapter 12, Arrogant Superior. "What's the matter, Manager Han?" Shin asked. Shin wondered why Manager Han would call so early in the morning. "Mr. Suzuki, you'll be surprised to know that many people are already playing your video game machines," Manager Han's voice sounded through the phone. Shin was quite surprised, but he replied calmly, "Really? That's great." "You don't seem surprised," Manager Han chuckled. "Hehe, I just like to act calm," Shin said with a smile. After their conversation, they ended the call. Myra, who was beside Shin and heard that their video game machines were already being played by many people, exclaimed excitedly, "Looks like those kids got there really early." Shin shook his head in response and chuckled, "Those kids must have been eager to go to the Ctto Entertainment Center at 9 am. Myra nodded and said, "Maybe they live near the Ctto Entertainment Center." Shin smiled and said, "Wanna go there? The delivery for the components might be arriving later." Myra nodded in agreement, saying, "Let's go." When Shin and Myra arrived at the arcade section of the Ctto Entertainment Center, they were surprised to see that many people were already there. The lively atmosphere created by the kids playing and some adults also trying out the video game machines had attracted the attention of other adults who frequented the pachinko and gasapon sections. As a result, a crowd had gathered, with many people curious to see the unique pixelated game the kids were playing. They were eager to try Super Mario themselves but couldn't find an available spot at the moment. Over time, some of them either returned to playing pachinko or watched the kids play with interest. "Wow! I expected some people to be playing, but I didn't expect it to be this popular," Shin, Myra exclaimed in surprise. Shin smiled, feeling gratified by the sight. He knew that soon, not only these people but thousands, if not millions, would be interested in his video games and consoles. They spotted Li Han there, observing the scene with his hand on his chin. When he saw Shin and Myra, he greeted both of them. "You see, a lot of people unexpectedly took interest in your video game machines," Li Han exclaimed. Seeing Shin smile and nod, Li Han asked, "Are the video game machines for sale now?" He tried his luck. "I don't think so, especially now that the video game machines are earning," Shin shook his head. Li Han had expected that answer and nodded. They had a conversation for a while, and Shin excitedly observed the lively atmosphere around his video game machines. Finally, he decided it was time to return to his apartment, especially when he received a text notification that his delivery had arrived. Shin and Myra had already gained experience in assembling the video game consoles, so in just a few hours, they had successfully put them together. Meanwhile, in Manager Han's office, he received the earnings report for the day. Along with it came the 14,000 yen payment for the rent of the Kishin video game machines. Although he didn't have precise figures for the tenants' earnings, his subordinates always made rough estimates. Li Han was somewhat shocked to see that the video game machines, despite his initial doubts, had earned at least 33,000 yen. While Li Han knew that the Kishin video game machines had been played by many people early in the morning, he wasn't sure if they remained popular throughout the day. However, he hadn't anticipated that these video game machines would become so popular that they'd likely remain occupied for most of the day. Li Han considered calling the general manager or the assistant general manager to discuss the possibility of purchasing Kishin video game machines. To be precise, Li Han held the position of section manager, responsible for overseeing the game section, which included capsule toy machines, photo booths, and the karaoke section particularly popular among visitors to the Ikebaro Center. Li Han had decided to call the assistant general manager, who happened to be the general manager's son, Ctto Kimura. The young man was inexperienced and displayed arrogance due to his high rank, especially when addressing lower-ranking employees. The phone rang, and when it was answered, a young man's voice spoke, "Hello, Section Manager Han. What's the matter?" Li Han hesitated to voice his opinion, considering that Ctto Kimura was known for his arrogant behavior. "Mr. Kimura. Call me by my title, Section Manager Han," Ctto Kimura interrupted Li Han. Assistant General Manager Li Han started again. "Don't add assistant. It sounds unpleasant. Just call me General Manager, please, Section Manager Han," the young man interjected with annoyance. "GE General Manager Kimura." Li Han emphasized the title, perhaps as flattery or perhaps as a subtle mockery, a sentiment the young man wouldn't fully grasp. Ctto chuckled, and his smug smile could be heard through the phone. Li Han gritted his teeth in annoyance. One of the reasons he had left Korea was because of encounters with wealthy second-generation individuals who acted superior to others. Unfortunately, it seemed that such individuals existed in this country as well. Li Han sighed helplessly before saying, "I have a proposal to discuss with you." "What is it, Section Manager Han?" Ctto asked with a hint of interest. Li Han proceeded to express his enthusiasm and interest in the Kishin video game consoles. However, Ctto remained nonchalant throughout the conversation and simply stated, "Oh, that? I thought it was a big deal." Sigh. The disappointment in Ito's voice was apparent over the phone. Li Han couldn't help but feel a twitch in the corner of his mouth. Ctto continued, his tone dripping with arrogance, "There's no need to buy it. In fact, there's no need even to consider buying it. And as for the potential popularity of those video game machines? Don't make me laugh. You yourself mentioned that it didn't earn much on the first day. On the second day, it got lucky, but that was only because it happened to be a Sunday, drawing in more visitors to our Ikebaro Center. So, yes, the video game machines rode the coattails of our Ikebaro Center's existing reputation and popularity to make some money. But mark my words, it will only be profitable on Sundays." Ctto concluded, his words flowing rapidly. Li Han couldn't find a rebuttal, and he realized that arguing with this young man, who exuded an unwarranted sense of superiority, would be futile. Chapter 13, Profits. Shin arrived at the Ikebaro Center alone while Myra was still sleeping. She wasn't much of an early riser, especially after the tiring task of assembling the 3 video game consoles with Shin. Upon arrival, Shin visited Manager Han to hire some people to collect the coins from the video game machines. Both Shin and Manager Han were taken aback by the substantial number of 10 yen coins they had collected. Li Han asked Shin with confusion, "Mr. Suzuki, I've been meaning to ask this, but why are your video game machines so cheap? I mean, 10 yen? Even some vending machines on the streets wouldn't be priced that low." He hesitated slightly, worried that Shin might take offense. Shin was caught off guard by the question. He hadn't considered the strong spending power of Japan's population. He had underestimated it, assuming that the country was still recovering from the economic bubble of a few years ago. The previous Shin, not being much of an outdoors person, was unaware of the true economic situation and had focused on programming rather than market research. Shin quickly searched for an explanation and said, "Well, the reason is that our target audience is primarily children." Li Han nodded in understanding and suggested, "I see, but it might be better to charge 100 yen for 3 lives instead. Mario can be quite challenging, and most players won't last as long as 10 minutes unless they're experts." "I understand, and once it becomes consistently popular, we can consider raising the price," Shin replied with a smile. Li Han agreed with the idea. After Li Han's workers counted the coins, Shin exchanged them for cash, totaling 36,040 yen. However, Shin wasn't complacent. It was Monday, and there were fewer people compared to Sunday, although it was still early at 7 a.m. With Manager Han's assistance, Shin set up 2 more video game consoles on the coin-operated machines he had prepared the day before. In fact, Shin had already prepared many of these coin-operated machines for future use. It seemed they might be needed sooner than expected. Shin's budget, initially at 148,000 yen, was now boosted to 184,040 yen. Later, Shin returned to the apartment and considered adding another video game machine. However, at 9 a.m., Manager Han called to report that many people had arrived to play the video game machines again. Shin saw this as a positive sign. So, he ordered a batch of components, and when Myra, who had just woken up, was informed, she fretted about being busy again. However, Shin reassured her, saying they would hire people to assist them. Shin explained, "Assembling a video game console is challenging, but it can be done by an ordinary person as long as they follow our instructions." Myra sighed, realizing that she might not feel so alone working with Shin anymore. Shin playfully flicked her forehead, which caused her to yelp in pain. "Ouch! What's that for?" Myra protested as she rubbed her forehead. Shin chuckled and reassured Myra, saying, "Don't worry. We won't be hiring anyone just yet. Our budget is still quite tight. So, we'll wait for the revenue from our video game machines at the Ikeburo Center to accumulate the funds we need for our future plans." A few days passed, and the daily revenue from Kishin video game machines averaged 48,000 yen. Finally, people in the Ikebukuro district began to take notice of the video game machines. With this upward trend, the video game machines continued to generate earnings. Following Li Han's suggestion, Shin changed the pricing to 100 yen for 3 lives in Super Mario. This pricing adjustment led to even higher earnings, especially as new players came to try the game. Surprisingly, people didn't complain about the change. They found it convenient and felt that if they were careful and didn't die too often, they could play for longer periods. Of course, this was true for some, but most players still struggled and lost quickly, ultimately blaming their own lack of skill. With the funds now built up, Shin was ready to start hiring people. Myra had been assisting him all along, and their budget had increased to 380,000 yen. Shin and Myra successfully hired 20 interested individuals for the job. They rented an unused building space at a cost of 9,000 yen per day, which was already considered affordable compared to other options. It was a perfect spot for their small-scale production. Shin and Myra began instructing the newly hired workers on how to assemble the video game consoles. Shin had designed the PCB, printed circuit board, for his console from the start and ordered it to be custom-made through a sales agent at Tora Electronics. This was a convenient option for him. Additionally, he had filed a patent for his video game console long ago. Now, all the new employees needed to do was assemble the game console according to Shin's design. In a matter of hours, they managed to produce 8 video game consoles. However, upon testing, they found that 5 of them were working perfectly, while 3 were faulty. Shin felt a tinge of frustration but knew there wasn't much he could do at this point. After all, it was their first day, so he sighed and accepted it. The 5 functional game consoles were transported to the Ikeburo Center, filling the space Shin had rented there. He realized that the space wouldn't accommodate more than 12 consoles. This resulted in an increase in revenue. Shin then began planning to rent space in other locations, such as mall entertainment halls. He had already contacted mall managers at other malls and the store managers at the Ikeburo Entertainment Center for potential rental opportunities. The Ikeburo Center was quite expansive, housing a variety of stores within its premises. Shin reached out to these stores to lay the groundwork for the future placement of his game consoles for rent. Meanwhile, in the meeting room at the Ikeburo Center, a sense of seriousness hung in the air. General Manager Fuyuko Kimura sat with a stern expression, joined by various department heads, including the finance manager, retail manager, and others. Seated beside them was the assistant general manager, Ctto Kimura, the son of the general manager. Lee Han, feeling a growing sense of unease, was also present. He suspected that this meeting had something to do with the sudden surge in popularity of Kishin video game machines. As the meeting began, General Manager Fuyuko Kimura spoke gravely, placing a report on the table before them. According to this report, there has been a recent influx of visitors to our Ikeburo Center, with a significant number of them being children. The other managers exchanged puzzled glances, silently wondering, isn't that a good thing? Nevertheless, they remained silent. The general manager continued, one of the key reasons for this increase in visitors to our Ikeburo Center, as indicated in the report, is the presence of the video game machines. This revelation left some managers visibly surprised. One of them questioned, but weren't those game machines consistently unprofitable? Why would people suddenly flock to what was previously considered a financial drain? The meeting room filled with voices as a lively discussion erupted. General Manager Fuyuko Kimura calmly interjected, "That's precisely what this meeting is about. I've been informed that a video game machine in Section Manager Han's department is now generating significant profits." All eyes in the room turned towards Lee Han, who suddenly felt the weight of their scrutiny and began to sweat nervously under the pressure. Chapter 14, The Arcade Machines Spreads. Lee Han found himself uncomfortable under the scrutiny of his peers and superiors. He decided to explain the situation, saying, it was Kishin Electronics that rented the space. They own a video game machine that's now turning a profit. This revelation led to a series of reactions among the managers. One of them questioned, "You knew about this all along, and you didn't inform the general manager about it." Another chimed in, "We could have acquired that video game machine ourselves and been the ones making money." The blame was quickly placed on Lee Han as the managers discussed the situation. They realized that the more the Ikeburo Center earned, the higher their potential salaries could become. Lee Han attempted to defend himself, explaining, "But I did report everything, including the machine's potential, to the assistant general manager." The managers fell silent, considering Lee Han's explanation. The general manager then turned to his son, the assistant general manager, and questioned him with a stern gaze. "Is that true, Assistant Ctto Kimura?" Ctto Kimura avoided his father's gaze and shook his head, replying, "He didn't tell me anything." Lee Han felt an intense urge to confront Ctto, but he refrained from doing so. He recalled that he had called the assistant general manager at that time because the general manager had emphasized that section managers should communicate with his son regarding such matters. The general manager often left minor issues to his son, as he was busy with other responsibilities. However, Lee Han was taken aback by Ito's arrogance and refusal to admit any mistake. The general manager's silence implied his support for his son's stance. The general manager addressed Lee Han, saying, "General Manager Han, as you can see, my son claims he had no knowledge of this." Lee Han clenched his teeth, understanding that the general manager was protecting his son. "I will forgive your mistake this time. But in the future, you must acquire those video game machines. If they refuse, then raise Kishin Electronics rent, the general manager ordered firmly. Li Han shook his head, explaining, the Ikeburo game section and Kishin Electronics have already signed a 3-month contract. We cannot raise the rent within that time frame. Frustration echoed in the general manager's voice as he slammed his hand on the table, shouting, then, after 3 months, raise it. That video game machine is simply too profitable. Li Han reluctantly agreed, saying, I understand. Retail manager Suzaki added, with such profits, Kishin Electronics might expand and rent more spaces within the Ikeburo Center. The situation had taken an unexpected turn, and the impact of Kishin Electronics' success was becoming increasingly evident. The general manager and other managers nodded in agreement, and some of them stated, let's inform our store managers. Meanwhile, Shin proceeded with his plan to rent spaces in various malls besides the Ikeburo Center. In the Toshima ward, several malls were available, and Shin visited them to negotiate rental agreements. The mall managers were unaware of the profitability of Kishin video games machines, so they offered Shin lower rental prices, which he gladly accepted. Over the course of several days, Shin, along with the growing number of newly hired employees, managed to produce dozens of video games consoles. Each day, their manufacturing process improved, resulting in better quality consoles. These consoles were then delivered to the entertainment halls of the malls that Shin had rented. However, a sudden call from the store managers at the Ikeburo Center surprised Shin. They informed him that they would be raising the rent for their spaces. Shin was puzzled by the unexpected price increase and thought, why are they suddenly charging more? Despite his confusion, Shin decided to accept the higher rent rates as they were still manageable. Shortly afterward, Manager Han contacted Shin, revealing, we had a meeting yesterday to discuss your video game machines. They suddenly became greedy, realizing your machines are making money. Understanding the reason behind the rent increase offer of those store managers, Shin nodded and thanked Manager Han, saying, I see. Thanks for letting me know. Before ending the call, Shin asked a question that crossed his mind, Manager Han, why did you inform me about this? Manager Han's chuckling response came through the phone as he explained, they wanted to lay claim to your video game machines. I had wanted to discuss the potential of your video game machines with the assistant general manager, but he simply laughed at me. Shin sensed Manager Han's frustration and came up with an idea. He asked, would you like to join Kishin Company, my company, Manager Han? Manager Han's surprised voice echoed over the phone as he exclaimed, you want to hire me? Shin chuckled and replied, yes, I believe you're a competent employee. There was a brief silence on the other end, and Shin thought that Manager Han might not be interested. However, Manager Han finally responded, give me a few days to consider it, Mr. Suzuki. Shin was pleasantly surprised to hear Manager Han's serious tone, indicating that he was genuinely considering the offer. Shin nodded and agreed, all right. Shin also placed a banner on his rented space in section Manager Han's game section, advertising the locations where people could enjoy the video game machines. The banner boldly proclaimed, Kishin arcade machines available at several malls in Toshima ward. This eye-catching advertisement attracted a lot of attention. It wasn't just kids who were drawn to the video games, high school students who frequented karaoke establishments and even workers who visited places like karaoke, pachinko, and gasapon shops took notice of the Kishin video game machines. Look, they've got video game machines at other locations too. One young man exclaimed. That's fantastic. Let's check them out. Agreed. Chapter 15, Manager Han joins. Shin was currently playing this world's version of Tetris. The game was rather dull, consisting of parentheses since it was created back in the 1960s. Shin contemplated the possibility of acquiring the rights to Tetris from its licensor. Based on the memories of his predecessor, he knew that the licensor for Tetris in this world was a company called the Newland Company. However, he also knew that this company was facing financial difficulties and was on the brink of bankruptcy. Shin saw an opportunity to purchase the Tetris license from such a struggling company. Myra stood beside him, and Shin inquired, "Myra, do you happen to know the licensor of Tetris?" Myra nodded and replied, "It's the Newland Company, right?" Shin confirmed her response and continued, "I've been thinking. Once we've accumulated enough funds, maybe we can try to buy the Tetris license from them." Myra appeared surprised by the idea and remarked, "Really? But isn't Tetris considered a somewhat ordinary game?" Shin shook his head in response. If the people from his previous life were to hear her describe one of the most successful games as somewhat ordinary, they would likely scold her. "You might not realize it, but that game has incredible potential." A young man found himself invited by his classmates to visit a mall for some fun. "Hey, Shoji, where are you taking me, anyway?" The young man, Cuba, asked with curiosity. Shoji, another young man in a high school uniform, chuckled and replied, "Come on, Cuba. You're really out of touch with the latest trends. We're going to play some Mario." "Mario?" Cuba looked puzzled. In no time, they reached the mall's second floor, an entertainment hall with a gaming area. The video game machines were already occupied by numerous players. Shoji cursed his luck and said, "Damn it! Someone beat us to it." Cuba curiously examined the video game machine. The screen displayed Super Mario in action, instantly capturing Cuba's attention. Shoji explained to Cuba, "See that? It's called a video game machine. It's a game console where you can play Mario." Cuba became interested, and after a while, the person currently playing the game finally stood up because they had been defeated. Shoji hastily pushed Cuba into the chair in front of the video game machine. Cuba was confused, but when he turned around, he noticed a crowd of people who had been waiting for quite some time, and they were not happy that Shoji and Cuba had taken the machine. Shoji quickly instructed Cuba, "Here. Insert 100 yen, and the game will start. Go ahead, you get 3 lives for every 100 yen. Cuba nodded and inserted 100 yen. The game began, and Cuba grappled with the unfamiliar controller. Due to his inexperience, he quickly lost a life. The people waiting to play couldn't help but laugh at Cuba's clumsiness. Shoji shook his head in amusement. Cuba waited for Mario to respawn, but the screen just went black. It dawned on Cuba that he needed to insert another 100 yen. Determined not to lose this time, Cuba persevered, but he ended up spending another 2,000 yen in a short period. Shoji grew concerned for his friend as Cuba seemed to be spending a lot of money. Shoji reminded him, "Cuba, is it really okay to spend that much? It'll be fine. I'll just have to break my piggy bank. I need to get that mushroom to advance," Cuba stubbornly declared. "All right," Shoji reluctantly agreed and even gave Cuba some of his own money. Cuba nodded gratefully and continued playing, fully immersed in the game. "Get that mushroom. Grab the flower. It lets you shoot fire." Cuba played with determination, ignoring the growing pile of yen he was spending. Shin was in the midst of a discussion with Myra and the company employees when his phone began to ring. "Hello, Mr. Suzuki. This is Lee Han," Lee Han's voice came through the phone. "Hello, Manager Han. What's the matter?" Shin inquired. "Could you please stop calling me Manager Han all the time? Mr. Han will suffice," Lee Han's voice carried a hint of resignation. Shin felt a bit awkward and responded, "All right, Mr. Han. I've decided to accept your proposition," Lee Han's voice continued, "I'll be joining your company." Shin was taken aback and exclaimed, "Really? Then I warmly welcome you to our company, Mr. Han." With a smile, Shin proceeded to ask, "May I inquire why you decided to leave your position at the Ikeburo Center, Mr. Han?" A weary sigh emanated from Lee Han through the phone as he explained, I didn't want to remain on a ship where the captain blamed everything on his loyal crew. Furthermore, dealing with a captain who favored his spoiled child made the situation unbearable. Li Han had grown weary of the arrogant son of the general manager, who seemed to harbor a grudge against him. Shin empathized with Li Han's sentiments, having experienced similar challenges in his previous job at a game company. He nodded and said, "I understand." Shin could relate, having worked for a game company in his previous life, where he was loyal to his boss, only to meet an unfortunate end at the hands of that very boss. Nodding, Shin expressed his understanding. "I see." Chapter 16, Attention. "You'll be appointed as a senior manager, Mr. Han," Shin announced. Li Han accepted the position without any objections. Shin had chosen Li Han as a senior manager due to his exceptional competence in management. Shin recognized abilities and experience in Li Han that Ikebaro Center had failed to see. "I'll resign now." "Sigh, this is such a relief," Li Han sighed with relief. He had longed to leave Ikebaro Center, especially since the son of the general manager had been relentless in pressuring him ever since embarrassing him during the meeting. Following that, Shin and Li Han engaged in a lengthy conversation before concluding it. General Manager Fuyako Kimura was currently reviewing Li Han's resignation papers. "You're resigning?" General Manager looked at Li Han with seriousness and inquired, "Why?" He couldn't comprehend why such a valuable employee would choose to resign. He was reluctant to lose such a competent individual. "I'm sorry, General Manager. I've already made up my mind." "As for why? There's no need to guess, right?" General Manager, Li Han responded boldly and unafraid. "Is it because of the Assistant General Manager and the pressure you faced from the video games machine acquisition task I assigned you?" General Manager asked, searching Li Han's eyes. Li Han remained silent. General Manager sighed in disappointment. After completing all the necessary procedures, Li Han left quietly. Shin welcomed Li Han after some time had passed. Li Han was taken aback to find that Kishin Company still operated from a small space in an inexpensive building. Shin introduced Li Han to Myra and all the employees. Myra was quite surprised that the Ikebaro Center manager was joining their modest-sized company. After some time, Li Han asked for the performance and revenue of the company, which Myra and the others presented without any problems. Li Han reviewed the reports with wide eyes. He exclaimed in shock, "Is this really the report?" he said as he looked at the revenue of the company. Shin sipped his coffee with a smile. He said, "Hee, what do you think?" Myra also chuckled. She said, "Even I wouldn't expect that our company will grow to this extent." At the data report, the earnings of the Kishin was millions of yen. 5.1 million yen to be exact. This is the days of earnings of Kishin. This is the earnings from all the Kishin video games machines in these malls and the Ikebaro Center, Shin explained. As he placed a coffee on the table, he gestured toward the paper that Li Han was holding. "Once we've maximized these profits, we'll consider selling our video game machines to these malls and the Ikebaro Center." Li Han was taken aback. "Why would you want to sell such a profitable machine?" Shin smiled and motioned for everyone to take a seat. He then proceeded to outline his future plans for the company, leaving his employees in shock. Taki was in the middle of playing a game of Mario with his son when his Nokia phone suddenly rang. "Sir Kurosawa, where are you?" A young man's voice came through the phone. "It's Sunday. Why are you calling me?" Taki replied, sounding a bit irritated. "I finally remembered the company you mentioned when you were telling your story that day," the young man exclaimed. "Kishin? What about it? Do you know them and play on their video game machines?" Taki asked as he continued to play Super Mario. "No, but that company is our customer." The young man's words caught Taki's attention, and he paused his game. "Really? Kishin is our customer?" Taki exclaimed in surprise. "Yes. With so many companies, especially small and large car manufacturers as our customers, I didn't pay much attention to the name Kishin. But today, Kishin placed a significant order for components from us, and it piqued my interest. Taki brought his phone closer to his ear and asked, "What kind of components are they buying, Kenji?" The young man named Kenji spoke through the phone, saying, "According to our company's historical records of interactions with Kishin Electronics, it all began with Kishin placing a small order for custom PCBs designed to their specifications." Taki took a deep breath, realizing, this might hold the secret to the technology used in the video game machines. After several weeks of witnessing substantial earnings from Kishin's video game machines, both the mall managers and the store managers at Ikebaro Center couldn't ignore the profits generated any longer. They attempted to contact Kishin Company to inquire about the possibility of purchasing their video game machines. Kishin consistently rejected their requests for weeks, but today, seemingly annoyed, they finally agreed to negotiate the sale of their video game machines. This decision came as a massive shock to the mall and Ikebaro Center managers. During a meeting led by the general manager of Ikebaro Center, he announced, "Kishin is finally considering selling their machines." The financial manager exclaimed, "If they are willing to sell, it must come at a high price." The other managers nodded in agreement. Assistant General Manager Ito Kimura arrogantly interjected, "So what? Regardless of the price, we'll buy them. Once we acquire them, the profits will be our reward." General Manager Kimura nodded, "Indeed. Regardless of the cost, we will acquire them. The profits will undoubtedly justify the investment. Besides, the video game machines are already proven to be highly profitable." The other managers couldn't argue with this logic and nodded in agreement. Chapter 17, Ridiculous and Enormous Price. Shin was currently negotiating with the new section manager of Ikebaro Center. Section manager Watanabe said, "We'd like to buy one video game machine for 50,000 yen. Shin smiled and shook his head, replying, "No, 50,000 yen is not within our consideration." Manager Watanabe's mouth twitched as he asked, "What price are you considering then?" Assuming he could easily negotiate with the young man, Shin raised one finger and smiled. Manager Watanabe, feeling hopeful, asked, 100,000 yen? "We could." 1.5 million yen, Shin interrupted with a smile. Manager Watanabe froze, shocked, and exclaimed, 1.5 million yen per video game machine. Shin nodded with a grin. "It's too expensive. We can't afford it," Manager Watanabe stammered, but before he could finish, Shin interrupted again. "Then I suppose there's nothing left to negotiate," Shin said with a smile as he stood up. Myra, who was beside him, began to follow. However, Manager Watanabe hastily exclaimed, "Wait, Mr. Suzuki. Let me consult with my boss first to see their opinion on this." Shin chuckled and replied, "Next time, I won't be the one negotiating with you." Manager Watanabe sighed in relief and nodded. Similar negotiations were taking place at other malls and stores that Kishin had rented. As Kishin continued to grow, Shin had enough funds to hire recent graduates who had been struggling to find jobs. One of these individuals was Masato Ctto, who had been struggling to find employment until he came across a job posting by Kishin. Although he had never heard of the company before, the attractive salary it offered caught his attention. He assumed the company was of moderate size, but upon joining, he realized it was smaller than expected, despite the generous salary. Nonetheless, Masato had no other options, and he found himself working under a young boss who was younger than him. The young man and a young woman instructed them to build a device known as a video game console. Initially confused, it wasn't until they tested it with Super Mario that Masato realized this wasn't an ordinary company. He learned that these video game consoles were being sent to malls and Ikebaro Center as video game machines. Due to his management skills and knowledge, Shin appointed him to negotiate with a mall manager. "Are you the owner of Kishin Company?" the mall manager asked. Masato shook his head and replied, I'm Masato Ctto, a representative of Kishin Company. I'll be handling the negotiations with you. The mall manager nodded thoughtfully, saying, a representative, I see. Thinking this was an opportunity to gain the upper hand in negotiations, he continued, our mall doesn't have a high demand for the Kishin video game machines. It's not a significant profit for us, so we're hesitant to invest too much money in acquiring them. Masato smiled politely and nodded. Seeing this, the mall manager decided to push his luck, suggesting, in that case, I'll make an offer of 40,000 yen for each video game machine. He wore a sly smile. Masato's smile disappeared, and the mall manager felt a sense of victory. But then Masato shook his head coldly and stated, it appears that manager Sano is not genuinely interested in this offer. Regrettably, we have to decline. If there's nothing else to discuss, then goodbye. Masato bowed respectfully, preparing to leave. Manager Sano panicked as he saw Masato leaving and hurriedly called out, Mr. Ctto, wait. I apologize for the low offer. I'm willing to raise it to 100,000 yen. How about that? Masato paused and shook his head, straightforwardly saying to Manager Sano, we're selling them for 1.5 million yen. Manager Sano stumbled back in shock and exclaimed, Nani? During the Kishin Company meeting, Shin and Myra were addressing their employees. A young employee expressed concern, saying, Boss, aren't our video game machines too expensive? Who would be willing to buy them at such a price? Both Lee Han and Myra shared similar concerns, but they understood Shin's strategy. Shin responded with a smile, you're right, they are expensive. However, consider this, 5 video game machine generates at least 50,000 to 80,000 yen in earnings. So, within roughly a month, the buyers will recoup their investment of one machine and continue to profit. Is it genuinely okay? Lee Han said hesitantly. He expressed his concern because he was aware of Kishin Company's future plans. It wasn't just him, the dedicated early employees of Kishin were also aware of these plans, which filled them with hope for the future. Shin reassured Lee Han, saying, don't worry. As we negotiate, we'll gradually lower the price. In negotiations, it's common to start with a high or inflated price compared to your expected price. As both sides negotiate, the price naturally decreases until it aligns with our expected price. Shin smiled and clicked the button on his pen, adding with confidence, I'm sure these people are smart enough to understand this. Myra nodded in agreement while discreetly admiring Shin, her face slightly flushed. Lee Han and the other employees nodded in acknowledgement of Shin's explanation. The general manager attentively listened to section manager Watanabe's account, as well as those of the other store managers. Unlike section manager Watanabe and the others, the general manager remained calm and composed. What's your opinion, general manager? Isn't the price outrageous? Other managers expressed their disbelief. The meeting hall buzzed with discussions among the lower managers until the general manager burst into laughter, silencing their conversation. Ha ha ha! The general manager laughed heartily. Assistant General Manager Ito Kimura, his son, inquired, what's so amusing, General Manager? The other managers regarded the general manager with puzzled expressions. Hehe, General Manager Fuyako Kimura chuckled with a sly grin, I'm simply amused by a group of individuals who seem to be discussing matters like fools and behaving like monkeys. He glanced around, his gaze settling on the people in the meeting. The managers collectively thought, us? Fools? Monkeys? Is he referring to us? Why is that, General Manager? The middle-aged financial manager calmly inquired, already aware of the reason behind the general manager's reference to the group as monkeys and fools. Compared to the other managers, the financial manager remained composed. Manager Naoki, it's truly frustrating that most of the people here have failed to recognize the common strategy employed by Kishin, the general manager sighed in disappointment as he explained to the financial manager. The others, particularly the general manager's son, appeared puzzled. The 1.5 million is merely an inflated price. If we consistently lower it in line with their expected price, we'll ultimately acquire the video game machines at a lower cost than that initial figure. The general manager exclaimed, slamming his hand on the table. The individuals in the meeting room finally grasped the situation and felt embarrassed at the same time. Seriously? It's such a basic negotiation tactic, and you failed to see it. You're a bunch of incompetent fools. The general manager growled in frustration. His son, in particular, had let him down, leaving the assistant general manager and the other managers blushing in embarrassment and shame. Chapter 18, Kishin Net Worth. The negotiations between Kishin and the mall management, as well as the store managers at Ikebaro Center, are ongoing before a final resolution is reached. The mall managers at several locations were successful in reducing the price from the initial 1.5 million yen to 800,000 yen per video game machine. The total sales of the video game machines across the various stores reached 16,700 million yen. Meanwhile, Ikebaro Center managed to acquire all 40 video game machines for a total of 30,500 million yen. With the increase in revenue, Kishin Company was able to secure a better building space. In the newly rented Kishin Company building, these figures left the employees astonished. Although they had anticipated this outcome, the actual revenue was still surprising to them. Shin, the CEO, shared in their excitement as he stood before his enthusiastic employees. Lee Han, the senior manager, remarked, currently, the company's net worth is 49,300 million yen. This enables us to explore other locations for producing our video game consoles. Additionally, as per Shin's plan, we will seek closer ties with Tora Electronics to secure better deals, discounts, and benefits for the electronic components needed for our game consoles. Lee Han outlined the company's current and future strategies. Shin nodded in agreement and added enthusiastically, even though we've achieved so much, our journey to the top is far from over. While our revenue today seems substantial, it's still not enough to purchase our own company building. However, it does allow us to raise our employees' salaries. He chuckled as he spoke. Myra, Lee Han, and the employees joined in laughter, energized by Shin's words. Some employees who were also attending university, like Myra, contemplated dropping out to focus on the young company. However, parental objections and financial constraints prevented some from taking the leap, while others were determined to do so, particularly given the increase in salaries. I founded this company just a month ago, and I never expected to come this far, Shin remarked, glancing at Myra, who smiled in response. Shin then turned to Lee Han and said, Mr. Ctto, you will be in charge of hiring new workers for Ctto consoles production. Mr. Han, you will handle finding suitable space for our console factory. Mr. Fujita, you're. Shin then assigned specific responsibilities to his capable employees. Those entrusted with additional responsibilities were delighted, recognizing that increased responsibilities also meant greater importance within the company. Afterward, Shin made his way to his new office, wearing a smile. The office was simply decorated with essential furnishings like a couch, table, and a desk bearing his nameplate, along with a computer and a comfortable, rolling office chair. Myra approached him, playfully nudging him and asking, "Why are you grinning like a fool? Are you pleased with how your office looks?" Shin smiled and replied, "No, it's not that. I just find myself missing that old apartment I used to rent, the original headquarters of Kishin Company." Myra playfully rolled her eyes and chuckled, saying, "Who would ever call that tiny, old room the first headquarters of Kishin? Only someone as blockhead as you would." She added with a grin, "I still remember the look of annoyance on your face when I made fun of it and you boldly proclaimed that Kishin would have several buildings." Shin smiled with confidence and replied, "It won't be long now." Taki examined the circuit board in his hand and asked, is this the PCB design of Kishin Company? Kenji nodded, confirming, yes, I was actually contacted by a senior manager from Kishin Company for a personal meeting. He then added, you seem quite interested in their PCB design. Taki eagerly nodded, saying, absolutely. Did you know I spent the whole of last Sunday playing Super Mario with my son? This PCB design probably plays a big role in its functionality. Kenji agreed with a nod, I haven't had the chance to try that game yet, but it must be fun. Taki quickly agreed, oh, it is. Kenji continued as he sat down, so, we'll agree to meet the Kishin senior manager in person to discuss the deal. They've placed a substantial order for components that Tora Electronics can't ignore. This deal requires a face-to-face meeting for contract signing, and will offer benefits and discounts that will be mutually beneficial. Kenji concluded. Taki nodded in agreement. Shin was engrossed in programming a game on his computer. With a series of precise button taps, he exclaimed, finally, it's finished. He eagerly clicked to open the game, revealing blocks of various shapes and colors falling slowly. Yes, it was Tetris. Unfortunately, the rights to Tetris in this world were already licensed by another company, otherwise, Shin would have happily sold it in cartridges. Myra happened to enter the room and spotted Shin playing on the computer. She approached and peered closer. Is that Tetris? Myra exclaimed, taken by surprise. Shin nodded. Wow, it looks both different and yet strangely similar to the original, Myra remarked in amazement. Shin nodded again before explaining, yes, I programmed it. I made some improvements. Myra finally connected the dots and said thoughtfully, I see. That's why you were so keen on acquiring the Tetris licensing rights. Yes, Shin replied with a smile, nodding in confirmation. Chapter 19, Slow Resurrection of an Industry. I've also created other games. Shin exited the Tetris game and launched one of his own plagiarize game. Myra watched with curiosity. Shin started the game, and Myra gazed at the screen, which displayed a yellow circle being pursued by ghost-like characters. Myra observed Shin playing, and as the yellow circle consumed a dot and then a larger dot, the colors changed, and the tables turned. The once chased yellow circle became the chaser, pursuing and eating the ghost-like characters. After devouring several of these characters, the colors returned to normal, and the roles reversed again. This time, the yellow circle was the one being chased. Myra watched Shin play, and after his character, the yellow circle, collected all the dots, it was pursued until it entered the central area, ending the round. What's this game called? Myra asked, her curiosity piqued. She was impressed by Shin's ability to create games like this. Shin smiled and replied simply, it's called Pac-Man. Myra nodded, feeling an urge to give it a try. Pac-Man, hey. Time passed, and it was finally time for Kishin to have a personal meeting with Tora Electronics. Lee Han entered a cafe and patiently waited for the Tora Electronics sales agent. After he had handled the rental arrangements for the workers producing the video game consoles the day before, his next task was to meet with the Tora Electronics team. A young man in formal attire entered the cafe. Lee Han remained seated, carefully observing to see if this was the person he was waiting for. The young man sat down in front of him and inquired, "Hello, are you Lee Han, the senior manager at Kishin?" He noticed that Lee Han was the only one in the cafe wearing formal attire and appeared to be of middle age. Lee Han nodded and extended his hand for a handshake, saying, "You must be Kenji Tanaka, the sales agent from Tora Electronics. Nice to meet you." Kenji accepted the handshake without hesitation. Kenji apologized, saying, "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting, Mr. Han." Lee Han nodded understandingly, "No worries, I didn't wait long." Kenji offered a grateful smile. After some small talk, he retrieved contract papers from his briefcase and stated, this is the contract for acquiring a significant quantity of components from our company. Li Han nodded and responded, we'll be ordering a substantial quantity of components from your company. We expect discounts and benefits as a valued customer for future transactions. Kenji understood and said, certainly. We've included a 3% discount in this contract, and there are additional discounts and quantity increases for future dealings. It's what our major clients deserve. He chuckled. Li Han expressed his gratitude and added, as you're aware, we've ordered components worth 15 million yen, and there may be additional orders in the future. He held up the contract paper as he spoke. Kenji was already aware of the deal's financial details as they were clearly outlined in the contract. This was a significant deal he was handling, one usually managed by senior members of the company. As stipulated in the contract, we've agreed on scheduled deliveries with intervals corresponding to payment intervals. Kenji explained the procedures. Due to Kishin's limited workforce for producing a large quantity of video game consoles, they had opted for scheduled deliveries, allowing them to make payments as the delivered items arrived at intervals. This arrangement suited Kishin's current situation. As time passed, the Kishin workforce grew, leading to a significant increase in the production of video game consoles. With this surge in production, the demand from various malls and the Ikeburo Center for more video game machines also increased. Shin continued to sell Ctto video game machines at premium prices, capitalizing on their popularity. The remarkable profits from these video game machines caught the attention of malls and entertainment centers beyond Toshima Ward, prompting them to contact Kishin for their own supply. To manage the growing demand and potential customers, Shin expanded his team and hired more staff. As revenues continued to climb, so did the need for additional personnel. Kishin Company grew to the point where it employed 100 individuals and hundreds of workers, largely due to the attractive salaries offered. Thanks to the capable individuals handling recruitment and communication with potential suppliers and customers, Kishin continued to thrive. Since Kishin couldn't yet afford to purchase a building in Tokyo, they relied on renting spaces. The cost per square meter for company buildings ranged from a staggering 1,000 to 3,000 yen, and entire buildings could cost between 200 million and 700 million yen. Therefore, Shin's strategy was to rent spaces until the company could afford its own building. Kishin attracted significant clients as they continued to sell their video game machines. As for whether people would play these machines in their respective wards, that became the concern of mall and entertainment center managers. Advertising played a crucial role in this aspect. With determination, Shin slowly but surely revived an industry that had long been dormant in this world. The popularity of games like Super Mario began to spread to other locations, including Tokyo malls and entertainment centers. Gradually, people across the city began to take notice of these video games, sparking a wildfire of interest. The spark ignited in a corner of the games section at the Ikeburo Center, but this wildfire will slowly spread its influence across the world. Chapter 20, Shin's Company Rearrangement. As the company began to expand, Shin realized that he wasn't consistently effective at managing his employees. While he had limited experience in running a company, memories from his previous life, where he served a loyal role to his boss, started to influence his approach to leadership. Recognizing the need for better organization, Shin called for a company meeting. The key employees, who had proven their competence and value to the company, gathered in the meeting room, curious about what their boss had to say. They couldn't deny feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. I've called this meeting to assign specific roles to my key employees based on your respective expertise, Shin began as he sat in the center of the room. Myra, always attentive, served coffee to the attendees, which helped ease some tension. However, as they listened to Shin, their nervousness returned, tinged with hope for more responsibility and potential promotions. Sitting beside Shin, Myra watched him expectantly, while Li Han, already appointed as a senior manager, waited patiently. I'll start with myself. As you know, I'm already the CEO, Shin stated as he sipped his coffee. He continued, Li Han, your role will be General Counsel. He looked at Li Han. Li Han sighed with gratitude and responded, Thank you, CEO Suzuki. Shin's gaze shifted to Masato Sato as he said, Masato Sato, based on my observations, you'll be the Chief Human Resources Officer, or CHRO for short. Masato Sato was excited and exclaimed, I won't let you down, CEO Suzuki, bowing respectfully. Shin nodded, acknowledging Masato Sato's talent for recruitment and training. It was a well-deserved role. Shin moved on, saying, Ctto Fujita, you will be the sales manager. Your efforts in negotiation and building relationships with our clients have not gone unnoticed. Ctto Fujita smiled widely, bowing gratefully and respectfully, I won't disappoint you, boss. Shin chuckled at the term boss, a reminder of how he used to address his previous boss in his past life. Despite being one of the youngest in the room, Shin had proven himself as the founder of Kishin. Yuri Sakamoto, you'll take on the role of company accountant. Managing the company's finances, including record-keeping, payroll, and tax responsibilities, will be your responsibility, Shin assigned to the young woman, a similar age to Myra. Yuri bowed gratefully and respectfully, saying, I'll do my best. She couldn't believe her transformation from struggling to pay her college fees to a promotion in a growing company. Speaking to another male employee, Kenta Fukuda, Shin stated, Kenta Fukuda, your position will be as a quality assurance, QA, professional. Your primary responsibilities will involve testing company products, designing quality test plans, identifying and reporting defects and issues, and overseeing the overall quality assurance process. Kenta Fukuda bowed with gratitude and respect, expressing his thanks. As the role assignments continued, Myra noticed that her name hadn't been called. She began to feel left out and anxious. Despite being the company's first employee, her position remained uncertain. Why haven't I been assigned a role? Is it because I'm not a full-time employee? Myra wondered. She saw other employees receiving positions based on their competence and talents, even if they weren't full-time. Shin eventually stood up, bowed formally, and concluded, That's all. Everyone except Myra, please leave the room. The employees nodded in unison, bowing respectfully before exiting the room. Some, like Li Han, glanced thoughtfully at Myra. Most were concerned, as Myra was not only competent but also kind-hearted. Firing a person they liked and admired was something they couldn't find pleasure in. After the other employees had left and the door closed behind them, the only people remaining in the meeting room were Shin and Myra. Myra couldn't help but feel nervous and apprehensive. She was uncertain about her future in the company and feared that Shin might decide to let her go. Her nervousness was heightened by the fact that she had a small crush on Shin, which was one of the reasons she wanted to stay with his company, in addition to the remarkable growth in its net worth from being a struggling company just a month ago. Shin, with a serious expression, crossed his fingers and hands as he stared at Myra. Her cheeks reddened with nervousness and the intensity of his gaze. Shin spoke in a serious tone, Myra, I'll let you choose. Do you want to stay with this company, or do you want to continue with your university life? Myra pouted and couldn't help but express her frustration, but you've given positions to people who are still in university and not full-time employees. She pouted even more, her cheeks now as red as a tomato due to anger. She felt that the situation was unfair. Shin shook his head and explained, No, you may not know this, but before I assigned positions or roles to my employees, I learned about their circumstances. They informed me that they had chosen to drop out of school to focus on our company's development. He maintained a serious expression. Myra lowered her head upon hearing this, and a tear involuntarily escaped her eye. My parents would be furious if they found out I dropped out, she said, wiping away the tear from her cheek and eye, but more tears followed. Shin felt a pang of guilt as he observed Myra's reaction. He hadn't intended for her to become so emotional. Suddenly, Myra stood up hastily and seemed about to leave, saying pitifully, "In that case, I can only resign." Shin quickly reached out to stop her, and in his hurry, he placed his hand on her waist. "Wait." Myra struggled to free herself from Shin's grasp, sobbing, "Let go." Unable to bear it any longer, Shin revealed, "I'm sorry, Myra. I was just joking. I've already prepared a position for you in our company." He spoke hurriedly. "But I'm not dropping out!" Myra exclaimed, although she felt a wave of relief wash over her upon hearing Shin's words. "I know. I was just teasing you." Shin chuckled as he affectionately patted her head. "Then, were you joking about the others dropping out of university to focus on the company?" Myra asked, now feeling cheerful. Her emotions had shifted in an instant. Shin chuckled again and replied, "About that. I wasn't joking. They really did choose to drop out to concentrate on the company, especially when I assured them that having a diploma or not didn't matter as long as they had the experience and skills required for the job within the company." Myra nodded, feeling a bit guilty, as she realized that she was probably the only one hesitant about dropping out of university to fully commit to the company. Myra then inquired, "So, what will my role be in the company?" Shin smiled, about to answer when Myra interrupted, "Hold on, let go of me first," she exclaimed as she pulled away from Shin's embrace. Shin chuckled awkwardly in response. Chapter 21, TBS Journalist. "As for your position in the company, how about Chief Technology Officer?" Shin smiled warmly as he looked at Myra. Myra returned the smile and replied, "It's all right. Even if you didn't assign me a position right away, I understand. I know you're right. I haven't been as focused on the company's development as the others." She lowered her head as she spoke. Shin shook his head gently and said, "No need to worry. I'll patiently wait for your graduation, and this position is already reserved for you. Just continue to give your best during your part-time hours. If you ever find yourself busy with your studies, we can always find a substitute, but the role will always be yours." "Are you sure?" Myra asked with a hint of guilt in her voice. Shin nodded reassuringly, adding, "Absolutely. Besides, knowledge is a valuable asset for our company's future. So, keep up with your education, it will benefit us in the long run." He wasn't just saying it, he genuinely believed in the importance of education in technology development. Myra felt relieved and nodded cheerfully. Shin chuckled and said, "You'll be our first scholar sponsored by the company." Myra nodded and then had another question, "Why didn't you offer the same opportunity to others? Isn't knowledge important for everyone?" Shin smiled thoughtfully and explained, "I did offer them a chance, but right now, they need to focus on the company to improve their financial situations and support their families. It's their choice." Myra nodded, understanding the situation. Meanwhile, the employees chatted and speculated about Shin and Myra. "Do you think Ms. Myra will really be let go?" "I doubt it. She's the boss's first employee, after all. And I heard they're in a relationship, right?" A female employee blushed as she whispered. Li Han sighed, recognizing the youthful curiosity in his colleagues. "These young folks?" he thought. After some time, Myra emerged from the meeting room. When they spotted her, they quickly gathered around Myra, eager to learn about the situation. Myra greeted them with a smile and shared the good news that she had been promoted to the position of Ctto, Chief Technology Officer. Her colleagues congratulated her warmly, and the atmosphere became lively with celebration. Amid the cheerful chatter, Li Han, the senior manager, interjected, reminding everyone, "While we celebrate Myra's promotion, we must also remember that the company is still in its growing phase. We should return to our respective tasks." An inexperienced employee who hadn't been assigned a position chimed in, "But there are no orders yet." Li Han fixed a stern gaze upon him and retorted, "Even in the absence of specific orders, we must continue working on our plans. As employees of this company, we all have valuable suggestions and plans to contribute for its improvement. In the near future, the company will have several departments, and we mustn't become complacent. The reprimanded employee promptly apologized and bowed in acknowledgement. The rest of the team nodded in agreement and expressed their understanding, saying, "We understand." Myra let out a sigh of relief as the crowd dispersed, allowing her to continue her work. Koji Nishida, a journalist from TBS, Tokyo Broadcasting System. Not long ago, Koji had been casually strolling through the mall, in search of new furniture and toys for his child. However, as he wandered into the entertainment hall, his attention was instantly drawn to a poster displaying an intriguing device. On the TV screen of this device, a 2D pixelated character was featured, seemingly as part of an advertisement. Intrigued, he approached the poster and discovered that the device was located in the mall's game section. Curiosity piqued, he decided to seek it out. Upon arriving at the device mentioned in the poster, he noticed it was surrounded by a crowd of enthusiastic onlookers. As he got closer, he spotted an individual seated in front of the device, engrossed in playing a 2D pixelated Super Mario game. Driven by curiosity, Koji approached the person watching the game and inquired, "What's that?" He pointed at the video game machine. The person, who had been standing with hands in their pockets, turned to face Koji and responded, "That." He gestured towards the video game machine and casually said, "You must be new here. That's a video game machine. It's become quite popular around the place." This revelation took Koji by surprise, he hadn't been aware of such a thing in the Bunkie ward. Observing Koji's bewildered expression, the person chuckled and explained, "It only arrived at this mall recently. I've heard that each of these video game machines cost the mall a significant sum, which is why they've been promoting it in parks and other sections of the mall." Koji nodded thoughtfully, and his instincts as a journalist immediately kicked in. This could be an interesting topic, he thought to himself. Realizing that other journalists might have similar thoughts and could beat him to it, Koji decided to take swift action. He turned back to the person he had questioned and asked, "May I know your name, sir?" The man scratched the back of his head, clearly perplexed, and inquired, "What's that for?" Without hesitation, Koji produced his company identification card and displayed it for the man to see. Introducing himself, Koji said, "I'm Koji Nishida, a journalist from TBS." The man exclaimed in surprise, "Wow, you're a reporter." Koji nodded and wasted no time, asking, "Would you mind sharing your name now?" The man nodded and introduced himself, saying, "I'm Genta Hirano." With a nod of acknowledgement, Koji pressed on, "Do you happen to know a lot about that video game machine?" Genta nodded and replied, "Well, not a whole lot, but I've played it several times on this video game machine." Koji understood and thought, this should work. He nodded and quickly inquired, "Would you be open to an interview regarding this video game machine?" Genta nodded eagerly and exclaimed, "Of course. Absolutely. Ask me anything." Koji extended an invitation to Genta to dine at a nearby restaurant within the mall. There, he proceeded to pose a series of questions, and Genta responded with fervent enthusiasm, answering each inquiry with excitement. Upon concluding the interview, Genta couldn't contain his curiosity and asked Koji, "Will I become famous after this?" Koji responded with a playful chuckle and a small white lie, "Absolutely. Better have your pen and paper ready, as fans from all around will be clamoring for your autograph." Genta was overjoyed and exclaimed, "Really? Thanks a lot." As he distanced himself from Genta, Koji couldn't help but chuckle playfully. What a character! He genuinely thought the interview was all about him. Who does he think he is? Koji mused, recalling the valuable information he had gathered during their conversation. With an excited smile, Koji contemplated, "The one who stands to benefit here is me, not you, Genta." This is my opportunity to secure a raise and gain favor with the bosses. Chapter 22, Koji's Project. Koji immediately contacted the TBS media team, having already prepared the necessary information and conducted thorough research on the topic. The project centered around this subject was titled, The Glory of the Past, Is It Making a Comeback? Koji proceeded to get in touch with the mall manager. After a considerable wait, the portly mall manager finally appeared. Nice to meet you. I'm Koji Nishida from TBS, Koji greeted politely, bowing to the manager, who reciprocated the gesture. Nice to meet you, Mr. Nishida. I'm Taiga Aoki, the manager of this mall, responded the portly Taiga with a polite bow. Koji nodded and continued, as you can see, I'm interested in covering intriguing topics, such as the unusually popular video game machine located in the game section of the entertainment hall of the mall. Taiga nodded in understanding. Koji pressed further, adding, our information suggests that acquiring that machine cost the mall a substantial amount. Is that accurate? He inquired. Taiga, the mall manager, nodded energetically, that's correct. It was indeed purchased at a price of 500,000 yen each. He stated this with a slightly pained expression, though deep down, he was content with the decision, considering the high number of young visitors flocking to his mall to enjoy the video game machine. Acquiring the machine had proven to be a wise move, as recommended by a fellow mall manager in Toshima Ward. Koji acknowledged this information with a nod and proceeded with curiosity, I've been eager to ask, do you happen to know the company responsible for creating that video game machine? Taiga nodded affirmatively, saying, yes, we recently struck another deal following the initial success of the video game machines. The company behind it is called Kishin Company. He displayed the company's logo for Koji, who eagerly noted it down. The logo was simple, devoid of extravagant details. Koji continued his conversation with Taiga, the mall manager, for some time before concluding with gratitude, saying, thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Aoki. Taiga nodded in response, expressing his appreciation, you're welcome. Thank you as well. Following that, Koji received a text indicating that his assigned team had arrived from the station, responding to his request for covering a project story, even though the station wasn't initially aware that it would become a topic of widespread interest in Tokyo. Koji's team, which consisted of the cameraman and the researcher responsible for gathering additional information alongside Koji, arrived in a branded vehicle adorned with the TBS logo and the station's name along its sides. This is certainly shaping up to be an intriguing story to cover, remarked the researcher, Yuta Itabashi. As he recollected his involvement in gathering information for Koji's project, he couldn't help but draw parallels with the resurgence of Tetris in the 1960s. Ren Yamaguchi, the cameraman, nodded in agreement as he stood alongside the researcher. Koji simply shrugged and asserted, don't let your guard down. We need to cover this story quickly before other journalists beat us to it. Understood. The two individuals exclaimed in unison. Ring ring. Shin's phone began ringing incessantly, rousing him from his slumber. Exhausted after discussing the company's direction with the employees, Shin proceeded to establish several new departments, and the culmination of his efforts was the creation of a new company subsidiary. The key employees weren't taken aback, as they were already familiar with the company's trajectory. Kishin Games' trademark was officially born, heralding the company's foray into game production. Having observed the substantial revenue generated by his company, Shin deemed it the right moment to venture into game production. Ctto had already overseen the recruitment of programmers, and they had secured a workspace and purchased dozens of computers for game development. Shin had already charted and outlined the future of game production and development for the company, drawing inspiration from or even outright replicating the 8-bit games from his previous life. Shin also recognized the importance of game cartridge production. He understood that, apart from video game consoles, the real moneymaker was the games themselves. Without a variety of games to choose from, there would be fewer incentives for customers to buy the video game consoles, rendering them little more than decorative pieces. Shin was committed to creating an impressive game library. Especially the mass production of his company's video game consoles will commence in a week from now. As you might have guessed, the first company founded by Shin was Kishin Electronics. This means that the primary responsibility for game console production falls on this main company. As the company continued to generate profits, they increased their supply orders from their supplier, Tora Electronics. Thanks to the workforce recruited by Ctto, they are fully prepared for the production of video game consoles. Ring ring. Shin grew annoyed but answered the phone, concealing his irritation. Hello. He responded, a hint of annoyance seeping into his tone. The caller on the other end appeared to sense his irritation as he introduced himself, saying, I apologize for interrupting your busy schedule. My name is Koji Nishida, from TBS. Shin was taken aback and hastily inquired, How did you get my number? He asked cautiously, wondering if there was corporate espionage afoot. However, he quickly dismissed the notion, thinking, it can't be. There must be someone outside the company, like the Ikebaro Center, who managed to contact and record my number, with a high likelihood of leaking it. His thoughts raced as he contemplated the possibilities. In a matter of seconds, Koji would provide the answer to Shin's question. A manager from the Ikebaro Center gave me your number, Koji stated directly, not beating around the bush. It seemed prudent to be upfront rather than risk Shin's misunderstanding and having his number blocked. As expected. Shin nodded in understanding and replied thoughtfully, I see. How can I assist you? He inquired. Koji smiled on the other end of the phone and asked, Are you the CEO of Kishin Company? Although he already knew the answer, he wanted to confirm it. Without hesitation, Shin nodded and confirmed, yes. Koji grinned and continued, Mr. CEO, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a journalist from TBS station. I'm here to cover a story about your company's video game machines. Would it be possible for us to have a conversation over the phone, or if it's acceptable to you, could we arrange a meeting in person? Shin had initially overlooked Koji's introduction due to the surprise of an unknown contact. However, upon realizing that Koji was a journalist from a prominent station, Shin recognized this as an opportunity for his company, essentially free advertising. Who wouldn't agree to that? However, he wasn't inclined to meet in person, so Shin replied, I am unavailable for an in-person meeting, but I can speak with you over the phone, he offered. Koji was excited. Despite the rejection of an in-person interview, he could still engage in a phone conversation with the CEO of Kishin Company-wide. Chapter 23, Interesting Topic. A few days had passed since the interview. Now, all Shin had to do was wait for it to be broadcasted all over Tokyo. Math, or Shin as he was known in this world, had officially been in this new reality for 2 months. In that short time, a lot had transpired, and his company had even surpassed 100 million yen in revenue. It felt incredible, but a significant portion of that money had to be spent on creating departments, distributing salaries, hiring more workers, renting spaces, purchasing materials, organizing employee positions, and establishing a governance structure. Nonetheless, there was still a substantial amount of money left. Since Shin fully owned the company, all the earnings were his to control. He hadn't taken the route of having investors or shareholders yet, as his company remained unlisted on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, TSE. Shin didn't have any immediate plans to list his company publicly. He preferred to keep it private unless there was a compelling reason to go public. Going public would mean relinquishing some control over the company, as investors would demand transparency. This could potentially expose the company's secrets and confidential future plans to the public, something Shin, with knowledge from his previous life, wanted to avoid. Revealing his advanced knowledge would make him vulnerable, and that was a risk he wasn't willing to take. In just a day, his significant Ctto video game console production factory would commence operations. Until then, he'd have to wait to see the impact of TBS covering their products. And now, in just a moment, the video game machines featured by TBS would begin. At a random household in Tokyo, a chubby man named Takashi Murakami was eagerly preparing to watch his favorite movie. He was about to insert the VHS tape into the VCR and had even prepared some popcorn and a Coke. Takashi was an enthusiast of movies, novels, manga, and anime, although the latter two were still in their early stages in this era. "They finally dubbed my favorite Western movie!" Takashi exclaimed with excitement, holding the VHS tape. He had a ritual of watching the movie right after opening it. However, an antagonist arrived. "Takashi! All you do is watch movies. Go outside and get some fresh air!" scolded a middle-aged man. "Ugh!" Takashi stopped in his tracks, frozen. The middle-aged man, Takashi's father named Makoto, plopped down beside him on the sofa. "I'll watch some news." "Move over," he declared. "Father, I'm about to watch my favorite movie, dubbed in Japanese. Please, watch the news later," Takashi pleaded. His father snorted and replied, "Can't you wait? You can watch it anytime. Don't bother me." Takashi felt the urge to cry. He sobbed, "But I already opened it. I have a ritual of watching the movie after I've opened the package." He begged once more. Makoto, irked, retorted, "You're already this old, and you're crying? Are you really my son? Father, please. Don't bother me. Unlike you, the program I'm watching can't be seen again. Unlike your movie tape, which can be watched anytime. But our VCR has a recording feature. You can record it anytime." "Nah. I want to watch it live," Makoto stubbornly insisted. Takashi muttered in frustration, biting his pillow, "How can I have such an oyaji as you?" "Same to you," Makoto simply replied. Sighing, Mei, Takashi's mother, intervened, "You two are at it again. Mom, can you shoo father out?" Takashi attempted to seek help from his mom when Makoto interrupted him. "Shh. The TBS program is starting." Makoto gestured for everyone to be silent, took Takashi's popcorn and Coke, and settled in to enjoy. Takashi couldn't do anything but wait for his news-obsessed father to finish watching TV. "Good morning. It's Monday, July 3, 1990. The 24-hour news channel, JNN Newsbird, is here to bring you the latest news. Today's broadcast starts now." The familiar sounds filled Makoto's ears as he happily munched on popcorn and sipped his Coke. Takashi was already bored. After the weather program ended, an interesting topic captured not only Makoto's attention but also that of Takeshi and Mei. The next topic is covered by one of our journalists, Koji Nishida. The scenes on the TV shifted from one mall to another, and Koji Nishida's voice came through, saying, "If you look at it, it's just an ordinary mall. This mall, as well. But it's more than that." "More than that?" Makoto said curiously as he kept eating popcorn and drinking Coke. Takeshi gritted his teeth silently. It was his treats, after all. An influx of young people, especially students, have come to these malls with a purpose in mind. Are they dating? Poof, the country's future is bleak, Makoto lamented with a sigh, making an assumption without thinking. The narrator didn't even finish talking. Takeshi said irritably. All for one thing. They waited for the announcer's revelation. Why did it have to be suspenseful, anyway? To play on relics of the past, the arcade machines. Koji stated. Arcade machines? Takeshi said, confused. Makoto chuckled as he patted Takeshi's shoulder. It truly was a relic of the past. The arcade machines had games, with popular ones like ping pong and Tetris. Tetris, in particular, was quite popular, Makoto explained. I see, Takeshi nodded thoughtfully. I remember playing ping pong before getting bored, Mei said with a chuckle. Yeah, it brings back memories, Makoto agreed. He then added, are young people interested in those arcade machines now? No way. It was so unpopular even in the past, right? It was only briefly popular before declining. Mei shook her head. The scenes on the TV continued, now showing the previously unpopular arcade section bustling with activity. This once unpopular and empty arcade section is now bustling with activity, filled with people, mostly young people. The camera focused on a young man sitting in front of an arcade machine, with many people watching him play the 2D pixelated game. The camera zoomed in on the arcade machine screen, which appeared odd for a moment. What you see on that arcade machine screen now is the game that has captured the attention of many young people while the old remain unaware. The scene showed the young man continuing to play Mario, oblivious to the camera recording him. This is the new game that could possibly revive the arcade era of the past. The title appeared on the screen, The Glory of the Past, Will It Come Back? Oh! This is an interesting topic for today. Makoto exclaimed, rapidly eating popcorn. Takeshi, begrudgingly, had to admit he was hooked. It was a different topic from the others. Chapter 24, Broadcasted and Tora's Doubts. Takashi and especially watched the television with interest. The scenes played out as the narrator continued to recount. A bunch of young men exclaimed on the TV, it was great. Especially the new arcade machine with a new game. We liked it a lot. What was the name? Pac-Man. Oh, yeah. Pac-Man. Takeshi watched the scene and said, I feel like playing it when I see these young people being so enthusiastic. Makoto shook his head and said, of course. They're on TV now. Besides, young people are always full of energy. He stared at Takeshi and added disdainfully, unlike you, who is dull. Takeshi retorted, I'm not dull. The narrator continued, I have interviewed the person behind this arcade machine through phone call. That's right, the CEO of Kishin Electronics. Oh, I wonder what he looks like. The CEO doesn't want to be named, so we'll call him Mr. CEO. Mr. CEO, good afternoon to you. As the person behind what could possibly be the revival of arcade games, how do you feel? What do I feel? Well, I don't feel anything except that I feel good, the young man's voice sounded. Makoto exclaimed, it seems that the CEO is quite young. Takeshi nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Mei felt that something was amiss as her husband and son were actually getting along together. Are you confident that you'll be able to revive the arcade era? I am, the young CEO simply replied. Humph! Quite arrogant. Even if the arcade machines he produces become popular in several places in Tokyo, they'll never become mainstream. They'll remain exclusive to mall arcade sections. Makoto exclaimed, seeming to have a good grasp of the situation. Really? How are you able to do that? Do you have plans for that? My company's plan is already in place. Selling arcade machines to several malls was just the beginning. Can we have the pleasure of knowing the plan? Koji asked boldly. Chuckled, I can't reveal that just yet. But you'll find out soon. Kishin's ambition will soon become known not only to you but to all of Japan, the young CEO declared with pride. The young CEO seems quite confident, Takeshi observed. Confident? No, he's overconfident, and that could be his downfall, Makoto commented. We'll find out soon. Smile, I'm looking forward to it, Koji chuckled. He was also looking forward to witnessing Kishin Company, especially its CEO, potentially facing some embarrassment. After all, he had decided to cover this topic precisely because it was quite a unique and captivating subject. The discussion about arcade machines continued. Are these machines available at the nearby mall? Takeshi asked with curiosity. You should check for yourself. It's a good opportunity to get outside and get some fresh air, Makoto teased. Takeshi responded with a pout. Similar scenes unfolded in other households in Tokyo. In one of the offices at Tora Electronics, Taki turned off the TV as the program came to an end. Click, the television shut off as the VCR recording of the earlier program came to an end. What do you think, sir? Kenji asked Kazuya Nakamura, the CTO of Tora Electronics, a middle-aged man. I have a feeling that the young CEO is serious, and he's definitely ambitious. It's not just a show to attract people, Kazuya said, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Indeed, I've played their games, Super Mario and the new one, Pac-Man. I could sense their ambition. Taki exclaimed, rubbing his hands together as he felt a sudden chill. Kenji nodded and added, that young CEO is actually Shinro Suzuki. That's his name. He ordered a specific design PCB, and from what we've speculated, it's crucial for that arcade machine. Indeed, but we still need to acquire one of those arcade machines so we can examine it more closely, Kazuya nodded at Kenji. While Kenji might appear as an ordinary sales agent to Taki, he was, in fact, the youngest son of the chairman of Tora Corp. That's why he had quickly appeared in Taki's office to discuss this matter. We couldn't obtain it easily unless we used the Tora department store as an excuse to acquire it. Kishin only negotiates with malls, stores, or entertainment centers to display their arcade machines in their arcade sections, Taki nodded in agreement. From what I've heard, Kishin still owns some of the arcade machines, and they appear to be selling them at a reduced price due to the recent decline in Super Mario's popularity. In Toshima Ward, where Super Mario has been the dominant game, its popularity has waned in recent days. However, it remains popular in several other wards across Tokyo, Taki mentioned before adding thoughtfully, now that it's been featured on TV, it might regain popularity, potentially causing the prices of Kishin's arcade machines in various locations to rise once more. Kenji nodded and added, maybe the young CEO wanted to take advantage of the opportunity and make those malls or entertainment halls buy his arcade machines again at a high price. Taki agreed, saying, maybe that's the only way he can ensure his company's survival and avoid the fate of those arcade machine companies before them. Kazuya interjected, is it really that simple? Taki nodded, explaining, I admit that Kishin is ambitious, but ambition without a concrete and solid plan to support it can lead to a company's downfall. Kenji chimed in, yes, it's challenging to maintain the popularity of arcade machines over time. Once they're in malls and entertainment halls all over Japan, people won't need to buy them anymore, leading to a significant decline. Kenji added, indeed, businesses like that might show quick profits initially, but they're ultimately unsustainable in the long run. It seems like Kishin experienced a surge in earnings at the outset, but it was essentially a short-term gain. Taki nodded in agreement, stating, you're absolutely right. Such companies don't hold much value for large corporations or businesses in the long term. We're dedicated to pursuing long-term, highly profitable industries. And that arcade business simply doesn't align with that goal, Taki asserted. The more he articulated this, the more it resonated as a sound business strategy. Even if he held sentimental attachments to arcades, he understood that personal feelings had no place in the world of business. They all nodded in agreement. However, what they had overlooked was that the technology of today was far more advanced than in the past, particularly in the 1960s. They had failed to consider the emergence of video game consoles, which would become immensely popular, with almost every household in Tokyo eventually owning one. The Tora Corporation remained unaware that the golden era of video games was about to unfold right before their eyes. They were unwittingly becoming part of its history, becoming characters in the story of its inception. Chapter 25, Kishin's unexpected advertisement on television. After the TV broadcasted the segment about arcade machines, people across Tokyo became aware of Kishin Electronics arcade machines. Many individuals, particularly the younger generation, flocked to the malls and entertainment halls that featured Kishin's arcade machines. However, it became apparent that most malls and entertainment venues in Tokyo did not have these arcade machines. In other cities across Japan, the situation was similar. While people in those cities had also heard about the arcade machines, they couldn't experience them firsthand because there were no Kishin arcade machines available in their respective cities. The demand for arcade machines continued to grow, and Kishin profited as a result. Malls and entertainment halls in other cities also sought to acquire these machines. Initially, they expected Kishin Electronics to sell the arcade machines at a high price due to its popularity. However, they were surprised to find that Kishin was selling them at a lower price, around 300,000 or 250,000 yen each. The managers of these malls and entertainment halls couldn't figure out why, but they were happy with the pricing either way. Shin sat at the head of the long table in the meeting room, which had recently undergone renovations thanks to the company's increased revenue. During the meeting, his employees provided updates on sales, recruitment efforts, and the recent developments within the company. They also discussed their upcoming product launch in Japan, video game consoles. A few days had passed since then, and Kishin Electronics had officially started producing video game consoles. Due to the company's expanded workforce and the spacious rental space, they had been able to employ a large number of workers and acquire various pieces of equipment. As a result, the production of video game consoles had increased significantly, and it wouldn't be long before they were ready to enter the market after thorough testing. Kishin Trademark has also begun cartridge game production in its cartridge game factory. The programmers have also commenced their work on game production programming. Robert Johnson had taken a vacation to Tokyo, Japan. He had learned Japanese for business reasons and had a Japanese friend. During his stay, he led a fairly ordinary life, although he couldn't help but notice the occasional indifference and faint discrimination from some locals, especially older individuals, towards him as a foreigner. Nevertheless, he didn't let this bother him too much, as he had also encountered warm and kind locals. He even watched some news programs like the Japanese locals. One morning, he watched a program about arcade machines and became intrigued. Arcade machines were originally created in his home country, the United States, but their popularity had been brief before a rapid decline. Those arcade machines were produced by television and telecommunications companies, which were electronic giants. The initially optimistic investors soon became disheartened as the decline deepened. They had initially held hope, but their optimism gradually turned into sorrow as the value of arcade market stocks plummeted to rock bottom. They had lost their hard-earned money. These arcade companies had been cross-listed on U.S. stock exchanges, attracting investors from both local and international markets. Consequently, numerous investors lost confidence in the gaming industry. It seemed that the game market had never truly recovered after that devastating crash, which had left a lasting impact for many years. Given this history, Robert was genuinely surprised to see that arcade machines had managed to capture the attention of so many people in Tokyo. Robert's curiosity got the best of him, prompting him to head over to the nearby entertainment hall. Upon entering, he noticed a bustling arcade section filled with many enthusiastic players. Eager to try the games displayed on the arcade machine screens, he eagerly approached the machines. However, his excitement quickly turned into disappointment as the arcade area was packed with people, making it nearly impossible for him to get a chance to play. Determined to enjoy some gaming action, he tried other malls and entertainment halls, only to face the same issue of overcrowded machines. He sighed in frustration, realizing that he might have to wait until students were back in school, but even then, young adults took over the arcade games. Robert decided to try his luck in the early morning, and finally, he had an opportunity to play Super Mario. The experience was exhilarating, unlike anything he had felt when playing the basic Tetris arcade machines, which lacked attractive animations. Super Mario offered a fresh and engaging experience, and before he knew it, he had used up all his Japanese 100 yen coins. Those who had been waiting for him to finish grew impatient, but Robert swiftly inserted another 100 yen coin, halting their attempts to take his place. With a strong desire to continue playing, Robert considered exchanging his paper yen for more coins at the arcade section counter. However, as he stood up, a competitive crowd rushed to claim his seat, preventing him from returning immediately. Robert found himself in a frustrating situation once again, unable to bear the weight. He sighed, recognizing one of the reasons why arcades had struggled to thrive: the limited availability of machines resulted in long waiting times. Players who finally got their chance were often reluctant to repeat the ordeal. Feeling somewhat melancholic, Robert returned to his rented apartment. He couldn't help but reminisce about the joy of playing Super Mario. However, he reminded himself that he had only a week left in Japan, and he didn't want to waste his vacation waiting endlessly for a turn at the arcade machines. As a tourist, he had plenty of other things he wanted to experience, like savoring local specialties such as toriyaki, Japanese omelets, various types of ramen, and more. Robert decided to put the thought of Super Mario aside for now. True to his plan, Robert explored Japan's culinary delights and visited scenic spots, including Tokyo Tower. Although inspired by the Eiffel Tower in Paris, Tokyo Tower had surpassed its predecessor in numerous ways. Not only did it serve as a broadcasting and communication hub, but it was also slightly taller than the Eiffel Tower. Tokyo Tower boasted a range of shops and restaurants on its observation deck, offering a more diverse experience for visitors. Moreover, it had been constructed with advanced materials, undergone renovations over the years, and adapted to technological advancements and evolving broadcast needs. Robert was beginning to put the world of Super Mario behind him as he embraced his exploration of Japan. However, fate had other plans, as a commercial on an anime channel suddenly captured his attention. On the television, a child rushed home and, after greeting his parents formally, hurried into the living room clutching what seemed to be a cartridge. He inserted it into a red and white device. Seated in front of the television, he watched as the screen came to life, displaying in English letters logo, Kishin, with a familiar jingle that caught Robert's attention. The scene transformed into a 2D pixelated world, and there it was, Super Mario Bros. A narrator's voice on the television declared, "Now the arcade is in the palm of your hand." The scene transitioned as the child replaced the inserted cartridge with a new one, revealing Pac-Man. "You can now play with freedom," intoned the deep Japanese narrator. The child started playing as his parents entered the living room. He paused and turned slowly to face them. A pause filled the air, and then something unexpected happened: the parents joined the child in the game. The child handed a controller to his father, and they changed the cartridge to pro wrestling. The game started, featuring two characters engaged in a wrestling match controlled by the child and his father using their controllers. Laughter filled the room as the child and father enjoyed themselves, while the mother watched with a warm smile. It was a heartwarming family scene. "Play the games of the century," proclaimed by the narrator as the Kishin logo, slowly appearing on the screen. The narrator concluded with enthusiasm, "Now you can play with power." On the screen's text, it read, "Available in several stores and malls in Tokyo on July 25, 1990. Robert dropped his chopsticks into his bowl of ramen as he stared wide-eyed at the television.